Mr. Wells? Here. Mr. Young?
Here.
Ms. Sweeney? Here. Ms. Sutton?
Here. Looks like we're all here. Thank you everyone for coming. Let's go ahead and get started with our presentations. Jeremy.
Jeremy comes up. Commission members, just as a reminder, the commission had initiated a text amendment to alter or remove parking standards from the zoning ordinance. What we wanted to do, as we tried to wrap our head around how best to present the information to you, was go over what the current, kind of the history of the parking regulations and what the current regulations allow and permit. It's a bit of a part of the unpacking of understanding where we've been and where we're trying to go. So that's why we're calling this a kind of a parking ordinance primer first before we make any more changes or propose anything to the commission. So.
Thanks, Bobby. Good afternoon, commissioners.
As Bobby indicated, I'm here to sort of give you the background of the parking ordinance, kind of how we got here, what's in it, some little behind the scenes. I'm going to get a little technical with you, a little bit of specificity, talk about some case studies, and kind of give you a little bit of inside baseball, which give all of us as a public meeting, obviously, so everyone, but kind of what's written in the ordinance is what we do, but also we take it a little farther too with how we handle some things. So I'll go ahead and walk through it for you. First, I want to just start with the history of our parking ordinance. I'll start here with the 1968 zoning ordinance, but I actually this morning pulled, this is the 1949 zoning ordinance. This is it. Current ones, if you print it out, it's 850 something pages. This one is 73 pages. This is the entire zoning ordinance. Parking ordinance is 2 pages on here. Very, very, very simple, but I just wanted to point out, I thought this was really funny. We have 2 full pages of it, but tells you how many parking spaces you need for certain uses. Just so you know, bowling alleys were included in this. So we got to that level of detail where they were that important of a use that we had to make sure that every bowling alley had two parking spaces per alley. So we've come a long way, but parking requirements and zoning is nothing new. So it's funny to see what things were focused on through the different ordinances as you go through time. So just looking at the more modern ordinances, and we kind of think of the 68 ordinance as kind of the first of the more modern ordinances, at least I do. And so that one does have a little bit more thorough of a parking provision in it. We clearly had minimum parking requirements, which we had in that 49 ordinance. We provided some more detail about minimum parking spaces and loading areas. And you can actually see in the city, you can start to see the difference between something developed prior to 68 and something developed in 68, because you do start to see a few requirements, not like today, but you do start to see minimum parking spaces sizes starting to shape up, and drive aisle sizes starting to shape up. You start to see some of that coming out on the ground. It still wasn't what you see today, but you can tell a difference between pre-68 and today. 92, that is another big zoning ordinance rewrite there. That is, again, another modern ordinance that we use. Started adding a lot more things in there. Standards for that's where you start seeing landscaping requirements, screening for certain things. They start showing up in there. We do more with alternative parking options, valet parking, off-lot parking, shared parking. They start to show up in that ordinance a little more strongly. This is when we started doing the pedestrian commercial overlays. So 21st Street, Colley Avenue, 35th Street, Riverview, they have special zoning districts that in a lot of ways, they talk about the location of buildings, they vary the uses that are allowed in those areas, but they also did modify the parking requirements. So you wouldn't need as much parking as you would somewhere else because you're in a walkable pedestrian community. That first started coming through in the 92 zoning ordinance, under the 92 zoning ordinance.
Didn't change the minimum at that
we did change the minimums for certain uses in 1992. So we did have minimum parking requirements, a much bigger list of uses. I didn't bring that ordinance with me, but it's several pages of minimums. And so we did modify them a little bit here and there for some of those alternative situations. And I'll go into some of this more detail with the current ordinance, and started looking into that. So in 2014, still under the auspices of the 92 zoning ordinance, we did a dramatic rewrite of our parking requirements. Susan and Bobby and I were, Paula were all a part of that, but it was, let's all sit around as staff and we worked through it for weeks, figuring out what uses needed to be addressed, what the parking minimums were, more alternative options, things that could be varied here and there. So that was the first time that character districts showed up in any of our zoning requirements for the city. We actually put it in the comprehensive plan at that time as well. So pre the 2018 zoning ordinance, character districts did show up. That's the first time we had maximum parking requirements, so we started capping people, and I'll talk more about how that works. First time we put bicycle parking requirements in the zoning ordinance. We really, and I'll talk more about this, we did a lot with vesting existing buildings, which is a big part of what we do today and is not necessarily widely known. So that's something that we put in there, and we added even more alternative parking options to that ordinance. And when I say alternative parking options, what I mean is ways to look at a specific site and reduce the parking required for it. So you're doing valet parking, you're doing shared parking, you're doing off-lot parking. This is where you first had the option to do a site-specific parking study to really say, I'm like these other uses somewhere else, and so I want to be reduced like them. So we've proven that this use somewhere else in a similar sort of location can accommodate, can work with this amount of parking. So this was the first time that was really an option in 2014.
Back then versus now, I don't know that Ubers and the car taxi, were really kind of evolving
Right.
at that point. Didn't have golf cart parking, scooters,
Right.
long scooter, all those different modes of transportation.
Right. And so in 2018, we took that a little bit further. The 2018 parking ordinance is essentially that 2014 ordinance. We adopted a whole new zoning ordinance in 2018, but we really just pasted the parking chapter in there with a few changes. Obviously, we changed all the zoning districts, so a lot of those things had to change. But by and large, the standards were essentially the same from that 2014 amendment, except we did a few additional things. We played around with some of the exemptions and some of the alternative options. I'll talk more about those as we get further in. We did allow a reduction in parking required for adaptive reuse. That's something we use quite often now. So that's something, again, I'll talk a little bit more as we go forward. We really enhanced the landscaping requirements for parking lots, and that was obviously to meet a different master, but it is a part of the process. Since 2018, we have made a few changes. The two big ones, really three big ones, if you look at the sub-bullets there. We clarified the surfacing requirements. That was a pretty big deal for us. There was a lot of uncertainty as to how you could surface a parking lot, so we did that, I believe, in summer of 21. And then we've two specific locations in the Railroad District. We were pretty bold with our parking. You can do a 24-unit apartment building without any parking, off-street parking, in the Railroad historic overlay. So that's something that we've done since 2018, and we also, in the Broad Creek Refresh overlay, we were pretty aggressive with parking requirements for most residential uses there. So what is the parking ordinance? So now we're at today. We're in the 2018 as amended parking ordinance. What does it include today? And I'm going to go through these not in this order, because I think it makes some sense to look at them in a different way. But this is essentially what we use to regulate parking in the zoning ordinance. We have general standards and the design standards. We have exemptions and alternatives. We have minimum requirements, and then we have off-street loading and bike parking. I'm not planning on going into any real detail on those right now. I think today we're really just gonna talk about vehicle parking. And then, not in the parking ordinance itself, but the landscaping standards for parking. I'm gonna touch a little bit on those too, because they are, I think, relevant to what we're talking about here, with parking in general. So I've included them in the parking ordinance, even though they're technically not. So, general standards, this is something that everyone pretty much needs, and we've had it essentially since this 49 ordinance, if not before. I didn't pull the earlier ones. But basic requirements, you have to have striping, you have to have curb stops, you have to maintain it, all those sorts of things that you would expect. Really any requirements to have, just so you know what what is required, what a parking lot looks like, a parking space looks like. I mentioned a few years ago, we did address the surfacing requirements. That's a general standard. If you're gonna have a parking lot, a parking space, it has to be paved in some way or another. Different communities would do it different ways. We say it has to be a hard paved surface. We don't permit gravel unless it's part of an approved pervious paving system for a parking lot. So that is a part of the ordinance there. And then for reasons that I don't necessarily understand, but it's here, we put the maximum parking in here. I don't know necessarily why it's in here. I went ahead and left it here for this discussion. Maximum parking we allow, for those who are familiar with sports and salary caps, it's a soft cap. It's not a hard cap, it's a soft cap. You can go to 125% of the minimum. So if the minimum says you're required to have 10 spaces, you can go to 12 and a half or 13 without having any penalty. But once you go over that, you have to provide additional landscaping and or stormwater controls, or it has to be in a parking structure. So like I said, kind of like a soft cap. We're not saying you can't go over it, but if you do, we're gonna require you to do some additional things. Think of it like the luxury tax in Major League Baseball. That, you know, the Yankees are allowed to overpay, but they just have to pay back for it. So we don't see much in the way of people going beyond that cap. And in fact, one of the examples I have is someone, they very clearly stopped at that line for a reason, because they didn't want to go over it. So it is something that we put in fairly recently. That is a best practice to have a parking maximum at this point. I don't know that ours is necessarily aligning with the best practice nationally, but we do think it's an important thing to have. And so we do have it.
Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
do you require light?
We do.
Okay.
We do. That is part of, it's not addressed in the parking chapter, it's addressed in the, there's a lighting section of the zoning ordinance. And it doesn't necessarily require lighting, but it requires, or it prohibits dark spots and requires more you have to have a level of lighting that's consistent across your property, any of those public type of spaces on your property. And that's gonna lead you to having lighting in your parking typically. So it's a little bit more performance-based than it is a direct requirement.
Jeremy, before you move on, could you say more about
The approved pervious paving system versus one that's not.
Absolutely, yeah. So, and the picture, I actually included this picture for that reason. That is, I believe, Lambert's Point Rec Center, and that is a pervious paver system. And so the systems are really designed to have, you'd have the paver, usually there's trays to kind of hold the pavers in place, and there's an underlayment of gravel or something similar that the water can drain through. There are established systems out there, and they could be gravel paved systems, they could be pavers like this, there's various sizes. There can be grass paved systems, which we've played around with, but they don't always work great. And so what we work off of is the manufacturer's specs. We say if you want to do a pervious paved system, we want to see the specs and be able to review it. And we'll review it through the site plan review process, and stormwater particularly will make sure that it's appropriate for the location, that there's a maintenance agreement for it, so it gets vacuumed out, et cetera. And that it can obviously drain into the stormwater system wherever it needs to, or the on-site BMP, however that works. So that's how we implement that. And done fairly regularly. It's not an unusual implementation now. We're fairly comfortable with it.
Thank you.
So we also have design standards. So we have locational requirements. So something simple like you can't have parking in front of between a duplex and the street. We want it to be to the side or the rear. In certain locations, the rules will vary. So we have locational standards about where parking can be located. Those can get quite complex. I didn't bring all my notes on that, but that's essentially what that means. So we have a lot of that really speaks to specific site design, because we've seen some things that over the years that probably we won't want to get recreated. Particularly the parking lots in front is the big thing on that. We have driveway requirements. This is a big deal for mostly for single-family residential in our ordinance. And you see the example here. I mean, that is a traditional character district single-family house. It's allowed to have a 10-foot wide driveway, which I believe that fits. It's allowed to have a 10-foot wide driveway. It's required to have 2 off-street parking spaces. The driveway counts as 1, the garage counts as 1. And we spell out how all of that works in the ordinance. So we have a lot for single family, a lot of those types of requirements for single family based on the size of the lot. So the larger lots can get wider driveways or more driveways, et cetera. For commercial, industrial, multifamily, we have less standards in our ordinance. It's more design based. It's more working through the site plan review process with transportation and the various public works agencies to make sure that things are appropriate with driveway location. We didn't feel that a one size fits all in the zoning ordinance made sense. So it really just defers to, I think technically in code it refers to the director of public works, but it works through largely works through the site plan review process. And then we do have minimum parking space dimensions. 8 by 18 is your standard. And we vary, that's for your basic 90-degree lot, but depending on the angle that you want to park at, we tell you how big your spaces need to be. And this is an incredibly standard figure. Ours are a little smaller than a lot of communities, but we're obviously more urban than a lot of communities. So we do provide that level of detail. And we speak to not only the size of the parking stall, but the size of the aisles, and whether it's a one-way aisle, two-way aisle. We tell you different things for minimum dimensions. These are tried and true. And again, pretty much everybody's got these, and they are really well field tested at this point. So we're fairly comfortable with these, and these are essentially what was in the 92 ordinance. Last of the initial technical things. So landscaping standards. I went ahead and put this in here. It's not strictly in the parking ordinance, but it is key to parking. We do require quite a lot of landscaping in a new parking lot, and so you can very well tell what is a new parking lot versus what is an old parking lot. And that's the case in almost any city you go to, anywhere around the country. You can tell what's new and what's old. You can definitely tell in Norfolk. Once you get over 10 spaces, you have to have an interior island. Every parking space must be within 50 feet of a tree. So we're trying to get coverage, urban heat island coverage, prevention, and things like that. Perimeter requirements. You're going to have a 6-foot landscape buffer around the perimeter of your parking lot once you're over 4 spaces. It's really, that's what we're trying to do is just really those elements that you're going to have. Your parking lot's going to be screened, and it's going to have trees within it to cut down on urban heat island issues. We do have limits on how tall the bushes can be, so you're not causing conflicts with people not being seen, sight distance triangle issues and things like that. A lot of this is done, as with our landscaping chapter, it's a little convoluted to the layperson, but we do it with flexibility in mind, where we have equivalent planting units. So we don't necessarily say you have to have this many trees, this many bushes. We say you have to meet a certain number of planting units, and among them can be a tree, or must be a tree type of thing, to really give the maximum amount of flexibility. That's standard in our landscape chapter of the zoning ordinance. but really we built this around flexibility and as well to try and make sure that there are lots of options. So it's more of a performance-based standard than it is a strict standard especially with the 50-foot from a tree issue. You'll see the diagrams and site plans. In fact, I have an example here. It doesn't show up great, but you can see the dotted circles. It's not showing up very well for you, but you can kind of see they've got trees everywhere, and they've essentially said they're within 50 feet. And we work with them on some of the things like right in front of this is Royal Farms at Military Highway, I believe. So, this is just the example number one of what goes into the site plans and how we look at parking and landscaping and how they all fit together. So this just being a real world example that's obviously up and operating now. All right, minimum parking requirements. So that's something that has been in place here. I read it off, at least some of them in 1949. If you were a bowling alley, you had to have so many minimum parking requirements. This is something that is, I think, the biggest point of discussion in a lot of communities now as to how to address these. So we have different parking standards required for different uses. And so it's by use, not zoning district. It's by use and character district. So if you're planning a convenience store and you are in the traditional character district, you're going to have different parking requirements than if you're in the suburban character district. Doesn't matter whether you're zoned industrial or commercial, you're going to have, the requirements are going to be based off of the use and the character district. And really when we created the character districts, the idea was we were baking in the walkability. We were baking in the ability to park on street. You have more of that in traditional or somewhat coastal. You have less of that in suburban, so we adjust the standards based on that. And downtown is a bit of a different beast, but we'll cover that as well. And so the unit of measurement will vary. You need 1 space per square foot. You need 1 space per dwelling unit, per bedroom, per seat in a restaurant potentially, or theater. Bays would be auto repair types of places. Lodging units for a hotel. So we really vary quite a bit. And there are a lot of uses that we don't see very often and we don't necessarily feel like we know right off the bat. So they can be determined by the zoning administrator. And I'll tell you, when those come up, we just usually say, make us a pitch and then let's compare it to what else we have. We're pretty easygoing on that. What makes sense makes sense. But they are technically approved by the zoning administrator. Little small, but this is just a snapshot of the part, the start of this table. And so you see along the left side you have the uses. And so this is what you have here is the residential and the beginning of the public, or I guess the residential and the public safety, or public and institutional. And you see downtown, traditional, suburban, and coastal, the different character districts. And so you have, a multifamily dwelling, so an apartment building is 1.5 spaces in downtown per unit. 1.6 in traditional, 1.75 in suburban and coastal. So it varies depending on, and that's how many spaces per unit. Now that's the base. That's the base. And so we'll go into what that means because this is our starting point. And then so it varies based on just these different types of uses. And this, again, a lot of these came from, I'm blanking on the agencies, but there's national standards for a lot of these. That we initially looked at in 2014, we revisited in 2018. It's probably time to revisit again some of these uses to make sure that we're still in the right place, but there are the national standards. I believe APA is one of them. I can't recall the rest off the top of my head who some of the other. Yeah.
So, quick question. Some
Sure.
of the national standards have addressed the idea of trying to reduce impervious.
Mhm.
So if I had, for example, a need for 100 spaces, but if I provided 75 with the other 25 shown as green space, the municipalities have the right to be able to say, you can go under as long as you have the ability to add the 25. Is that something?
Interesting. So we have something in there called deferred parking. That's I think sounds like similar to that. I don't believe anyone's used it. Bobby, I don't think anyone's used it yet here, but we do have that. I'd love for someone to bring us a proposal.
Yeah, we used to do it with the larger office complexes where you wouldn't need to have 1,000 parking spaces, but they were desiring to get more landscape in, and they would never actually use even 500 spaces. So we would landscape it, but you had to at least show the set aside for it.
And we do have that in our ordinance, but no one's used it. That's been in there since 2014, I believe, and no one's used it. Maybe 2018. 2018, yeah, I think it was in the 2018 rewrite. So we've got a whole, to put this all on slides, it would probably take me about 6 slides to go through all the different uses. But it's covering a lot of varying types of uses. So the big ones that we end up hitting on are either in the residential or in some of the retail uses that are all fairly straightforward. All right, so like I said, the parking minimums are the base. They're our starting point. So we have written into the code a number of exemptions and a number of alternative options that get used quite extensively. We use them all the time. So just to start, downtown. Except for downtown Fort Norfolk, for whatever reason, I don't necessarily know why. For downtown Fort Norfolk, everywhere else downtown, you have no parking required. So if you're building something downtown, we don't even ask you about your parking. We're gonna make sure it meets the design standards, but we're not gonna ask you about minimums at all.
So even for the residential?
Yes, ma'am. There's no parking required for downtown zoning districts, except for downtown Fort Norfolk, but there's no parking required for those districts. Now, what we see is, and you could look out the window and see a new apartment building that has parking on the ground level. So obviously, the developer felt that they needed it and provided it. So we reviewed that against the minimum requirements, and seems to work. But they do meet we're not required to have any, but they do meet the minimum dimensional requirements and those sorts of things. And it's a structured parking, so it's pretty loose in that regard too. So.
We'll add to that also is that
That no parking requirement downtown has been in the ordinance for a while, when downtown was considered a special purpose interest, SPI?
SPI, yeah.
Whatever SPI, downtown SPI, whatever it was.
And that was under the 68 zoning ordinance, so that's a long time.
So we've, and to add to Jeremy's discussion, the city has chosen to develop parking garages to offset the need to facilitate development. So that's why the core downtown districts do not require parking. Fort Norfolk doesn't have any city parking garages, so that's why that was left out during the time frame. Downtown Fort Norfolk ended up becoming something new anyway after the base zoning districts, once Fort Norfolk started to redevelop a little bit. So, but that's why downtown districts have no parking requirement. The city has invested in infrastructure to provide parking in general.
So I will add that the city did work with downtown to provide parking for the residents at the nearest parking garage. In the beginning, it was they would put you in any garage and you'd have to walk 6 blocks. And then we complained and they did work with us to try to put us in the closest garage, which is positive.
Okay. The other districts, several other districts do reduce parking requirements. I've actually mentioned all 3 of those already, but those are specific things that we do work with communities as they develop their own plans, their own strategies for moving forward. We will work with them to reduce the parking requirements for those communities. We also baked in a reduction for being proximate to a light rail station. That one's been used once or twice, I believe, but it's if you're within 1,500 feet of a light rail station, you can, non-downtown, you can have your minimum parking requirement reduced by 25%. So that's baked into the ordinance right there. And as I talk about the reduction, those reductions we take them cumulatively. So if you get a 25% reduction here and a 33% reduction there, we'll take that off. We're not going to do the math and say, well, average it out. we'll do them cumulatively. So and we work through that constantly with developers through the site plan process. Pre-existing structures, this one gets tricky, so I'll try and walk through this one carefully. So if you have an existing non-residential building, or a retail space in the traditional character district, and you're changing it to something like a restaurant, with less than 50 occupants, or you have an office and you're changing it to retail or whatnot, we don't require any additional parking for you. We just look at it and say, no, you're good. Whether you have it or not, we don't require it. And so that caps at restaurants less than 50 occupants. So obviously, if it's a larger restaurant, we're going to want to look at, but there's additional ways to look at that as well. So right off the bat, we look at that change of use to one of those categories, which is most of what we're seeing in the way of commercial, is going to fit within a retail or office or retail or office category. It's just considered a wash, and we're not going to require anything more. For change to any other use, so typically we see this with the larger restaurants. The building is considered to have parking amounting to one space per 300 square feet. So whether you have that parking or not, if you have a 3,000 square foot space and you're going to a restaurant or one of a different use that's not retail or office, we're going to consider you to have 10 spaces, whether you have them or not. And so right off the bat, we've already given you a leg up on the existing spaces that you have. Now again, that right now, that is just traditional and coastal. So it doesn't apply to suburban, and it just applies to non-residential as of now. Again, change of use to an equal or lesser parking requirement. So you're going retail to retail. You're going from something that requires less, and this is across the board. So a lot of times we'll see this with industrial, changing from something with industrial that has a heavier use parking load to something that has less. Some of the warehouse uses, they'll switch around. We're not going to require any additional parking. That's a big one we use all the time too. Just to be straightforward, especially post-COVID, the zoning reviewers review every business license that comes through us for zoning compliance. So every business license submitted to the city, a zoning reviewer is going to look, Austin's team is going to look at it and confirm whether they meet parking requirements. As part of everything, whether they're allowed to do it. Part of that, they're going to look at parking requirements. They're not looking very hard on light to light. They're looking for the egregious scenarios at this point. They're looking for something that's really going to stand out. The larger restaurants, things like that, most of which have already gone through some other process and we've already looked at it because they'll need a CUP for alcohol. We're pretty hands-off on this. So existing buildings, we're not really bothering with them too much unless it's really standing out at us or they're doing an addition or really changing the use of something more intense. So just the code is a little more strict than I think our staff has been since COVID. And we may want to look at what we want to do with that going forward, but that's essentially where we are. And then the last one on this page, if you're a lot of 2,500 square feet or less, that's a lot, not the use, 2,000 square foot building or smaller, no parking required, period. We just zero that out. And there's a decent number of those properties around Granby Street, Colley Avenue, some of those. There's a decent number of those spaces around. No parking at all required. We don't even think about it.
So before we jump off of this, I think Adam coined it when it was in 2014 that this happened.
We ended up imputed, yes, we ended up giving parking spaces where parking spaces didn't exist in order to allow for redevelopment of property so that we're not just losing the structures. So it wasn't actually written down before, so using the term that I don't like using, but grandfathering of the use of a use that's there, the assumption was that you were grandfathered for a bunch of the other stuff that it didn't have as well, which then got translated into, well, then technically you're also grandfathered for parking. And then it turned it into like a 6-month study on how to give buildings with no parking spaces. And the reason for that was to try to codify what we were doing through the review process, just saying, it's the same thing. It's not any worse than that one. So we were working towards just really trying to document how we got there. It's odd because again, you're giving parking spaces to something that doesn't, but the assumption is that the impact is no different, right? And so that's really what. Yeah. So. At least by the raw numbers, you have to calculate it. So, as you can see through all these exemptions that Jeremy brought up, they're all very tactical. There was something that was brewing. Take the PCOs for example. We didn't create the PC. We nudged the PCOs, but they were already coordinating themselves, the business districts, and we said, well, what else can we do to help move that forward? The railroad district. People were already organizing themselves, they were already doing things, and then we were like, well, what else can we do to nudge them forward to help keep them moving? Again, a lot of these are all very tactical in nature. Because what is it? The Lenny's famous line: if you zone, just because you zone it for oil, then you won't hit oil, right? And so we try to just be very tactical when we come across this, because as we know, even when we remove the parking requirement, as Jeremy noted, people still put parking because they know there's an impact. They know that their clients are going to want them, or their vendor's going to need them. For those that do any of the development, it's just going to be required anyway. So I'll just add that. I know I didn't want to try to take any of Jeremy's team, but I didn't want to leave this because he's going to go into some of the other alternatives that we have, which a lot of people haven't used without a lot of times us nudging them to use them. So
What I'm hoping we get to is that nudge is maybe, to what Jeff said earlier, is almost putting the green space as a priority of, in addition to parking. If you're gonna put in parking, also account for some additional green space. And I know that some areas are gonna have to have parking, they're gonna want to have parking for their business and so forth. But the more we can promote it as an alternative to, and maybe you're gonna get to that in your discussion, but building that in as part of the requirement, almost like, that's the way to prevent this from becoming just this impervious world that we're, seeing things develop and push to. Anyway, just my thoughts.
Did you have something you were going to add, Jeff?
Always better not.
Okay.
Come on.
All right, so in addition to the exemptions, we do have a set of alternatives that we do use quite extensively. Some more than others, but we do use quite extensively. And so these, again, like I said, these are used, they stack. So we're gonna let you use multiples of these. And ultimately it just comes down to, does it make sense in the end? And that's where we tend to get to. So I mentioned earlier, adaptive reuse. If you're converting a commercial or industrial or institutional building to residential, right off the bat, 1 space per unit is required. And we've done less, we've allowed less through some of the other alternatives, but you're going from 1.7 or 1.5 down to 1.0 right off the bat. That's just baked into the ordinance, because we would prefer to have you use an existing building than build a new one. And so we're going to give you that leeway. Off-lot parking has been in the ordinance for a very long time. A select number of your spaces can be provided on a nearby lot. And so select number, it depends on where you are. In a PCO, it can be 100%. I believe typically it's going to be 50% of your spaces. Your required spaces can be off-lot, and they're just within 500 feet with a safe, convenient pedestrian path. And so you saw that recently with the boxing gym on 35th Street, where they talked about where the parking was going to be. That was off-lot parking, and because that's a location that does have required parking. They were changing the use to require, and it does have, and so they did have to show where that had to be. Shared parking is something we use quite a bit. This is where sometimes the nudge comes into play a little bit, is because a lot of times the developers aren't thinking in those terms. and we'll say, well, you're putting a mixed use here, why don't we just overlap? They're not gonna be, the residents aren't gonna be there at the same time as the retail or as the office tenants, so why don't we share it? So sometimes we do some nudging on that one to try and get them to, because usually what ends up happening is we're reviewing these site plans, is they're deficient on open space landscaping, something like that, and we really push for those things, to Scott's point. We're really pushing for that greenery, and so sometimes we'll say, well, you can do some more shared, you can do some of these other alternatives, can we get some of that around? Because that's what's deficient when they submit it first off, is actually the landscaping, open space, buffering, that sort of thing.
Okay, great. Here's a kind of a strange question. Could you combine the two?
Mm-hmm.
So we have shared parking on the same lot. Would you have it within the 500 feet? Would you have it adjacent to, like there are two lots next to each other, different uses? Would you ever consider that?
Yeah, I think we would. Yeah.
Gives you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, and that's the flexibility is the name of the game with all of this, is that we really do work with them to make sure that it works.
As an example to that, what's one that you won't see normally, but if you take a look at the shopping center on the northeast quadrant of Ward's Corner, all of those are separate owners, but it's one field of parking.
Right.
Everyone shares the parking, we're just like, yeah, you're good, right? So that's although it's not as something that you can see, that is one where there's multiple owners that don't have their own parking, they're all sharing.
Great.
Great example.
Yeah, and that's something we do as a matter of course. Jeff, you had mentioned the concept of deferred parking. We do allow 25% of your spaces based on a parking study to be saved as essentially green space or something else. I don't believe anyone's requested that as well, but I do like the idea of we can encourage it more, we can push it. We can have those conversations with people, especially where they're coming in with seemingly high numbers of parking. We use quite often, though, the site-specific parking study. And one of the examples I have coming up where is the new apartment, the adaptive reuse of the apartment building, of the office building on Granby Street in Riverview. They gave us a site-specific parking study that showed, look, we manage a lot of these other buildings. We know what our parking demand is going to be. Here's the numbers, here's the data, here's the sites. And I'll tell you, originally they showed us for that one, they showed us sites that weren't good matches. They showed us much more suburban style sites, and we said, no, we need a clear site that really does match this one. But if they provide that to us, and it's a parking study that they prepare, and again, their engineers are going to do this for them, we can reduce up to 50% of the minimum parking requirement, and we've done that on a few occasions. And then there's another one that sits there. The zoning administrator essentially gets to approve a 30% reduction for good cause otherwise, essentially. It's written, I wrote it as alternative parking plan. It's just, if you've got proximity to transit, if you've got, site design that could you've got lots of on-street parking, if you have unusually small sizes of units, we can look at that and we can do a 30% reduction. That's really useful on a lot of our odd uses, the warehouse building being converted into a karate studio or something like that, where we will look at that and use that one quite often. That one ends up being more valuable for those unusual, where they're not hiring an engineer to do that site-specific parking study, or they're not building out, so they can't do some of the other things. But we'll be able to use those. We use that quite often. There are some design professionals in town that are really good at doing that for us and really understand how that works, and we'll just bring those in. So, all right, I'm going to conclude my presentation with a set of 4 case studies, just touching on some of the things that we are dealing with and how some of these things work together. So the first one is that adaptive reuse apartment building, mixed-use building on Granby Street in Riverview. So what you have here is you have 2 buildings, an existing office building being converted to mixed use with 28 units and a moderate amount of commercial space, and a new building being built with 26 units and a similar amount of commercial space. So initially, just a straight read of the situation. they would be required to have 90 parking spaces. So 6 for the commercial, 87 for the multifamily at a 1.6 calculation. So that's the base. Obviously, that's an unusual site, it's a tight site, it's an adaptive reuse, so we can start to play around with the numbers. When we played around with the reductions, the adaptive reuse 1-to-1, I think we did some shared parking. We got them down to 55 spaces required. So we said, we'll accept you, their parking study said 55 could work. We said we would accept that and let them move forward through the process of that number. They ended up coming back with 63. They said, we've got the space, it's what we think we really need, and that's what they put in their site plan, and they're going through the process right now. So it may land someplace different as we finish the site plan review process, but right now they're at 63. And just, go ahead, sure.
So do you think there's an alternative that could be presented to them versus trying to hit 63?
I know Jonathan and I talked to them a few months ago and tried to get a little more landscaping, and I recall the discussion was, no, this is the number we need. So I don't know whether it was a financing thing, whether it was an understanding of market, whatever it was, but we did try, because they are going to get an alternative landscape plan because they can't strictly meet the ordinance. It's a really unusual site. But we did exactly that. We tried to push them further, and this is really what we need.
It was monument, so they have a pretty good idea of what they
They
need.
know, I was gonna say markets are gonna drive that way.
Yeah. But this is what we do. This is the conversation that we do have. And like I said, there's always a lot of masters. And we're usually speaking for the landscaping more than anything. We're usually speaking for the green and the open space more than anything. Traditionally, if you went back 30 years, we might have spoken for the parking more. Now we're really speaking for that open space, and we're really trying to push them on it. We probably could push harder on something like this, but I think they were pretty clear. This is what we need to do, and so we can only push so hard. Another example, Suburban, very large project. This was on Kempsville Circle, backed up to the interstate, on the Barry Robinson site. Couple of very large apartment buildings. So 295 units, at 1.75 spaces per unit, they required 518 parking spaces. That is an enormous amount of parking, obviously. They are suburban, they're not particularly walkable. I guess if you lived there and worked at Centerra Lee, it'd be a fantastic location, but it's not particularly walkable a lot of other things, so that's why you have that 1.75 spaces. Again, this is a multifamily developer that does have a lot of experience developing. They prepared a parking study, and they came to us and they said, we need 1.55, that will work for us, and that gets us to 457, which happens to fit in quite well and lets us still meet all the other requirements. Completely green site, new development. We're going to hold them strictly on landscaping and open space and things like that. And so they said, we think 457 makes sense. I think our conversation was, we'll let you go lower if you want, but they said, no, this is our number, and that's well within that reduction allowed for the site-specific parking study. You can see it's unfortunately a sea of parking around buildings, but suburban tucked back against the interstate. It is what it is, but that is, at least we were able to, with the ordinance, take a decent number of parking spaces off the requirement. I'd love to be able to take some more or be able to do something different with it, but the code doesn't allow us to do it right now. I mean, perhaps even something requiring pervious for, a stricter cap or something, but we can only, I don't know how far we can go, something I think we could certainly look at. Little more interesting commercial example, and this was District of Pisa, so they've obviously already closed since this, but this was still a good example of how this works. I don't think they closed because of the parking. I don't know that for sure, but nobody told me it was the parking was the problem. So this was a restaurant reuse of a pre-existing retail use. It was a thrift store, I believe. So the restaurant calculation came down to 3,700 square foot of the assembly area, and that's what we calculated off of. With that, they would be required to have 21 spaces. So at one parking space for every 175 square feet of assembly area. So again, we're taking a 6,800 square foot building, we're reducing the parking burden down to the assembly area only. So that's right off the bat, we're cutting the building in half, basically, at 1 to 175. So the building is actually already vested for 23 spaces. So they've got what we like to call mythical parking. They've got mythical parking that gets them to 23 at one space per every 300 square feet. So they're vested for that off of one of those standard exemptions. And they have 14, and they wanted 14. And so that's what they ended up doing. They fixed up that parking lot now, and they landscaped it nicely, including some in the right-of-way along 25th Street. But we got some nice improvements out of it. Unfortunately, they didn't make it, but maybe the next operator can come in here and make use of that. And we do have a nicely improved parking lot and a building that's ready to go in that case. So this is a pretty solid use of that exemption, that they were essentially, for lack of a better term, grandfathered at 1 per 300. Now, we're not going to let them remove those spaces under that exemption. They got to keep them, but they have more than enough to meet the code at what they have.
One nuance I'll share with the commission that kind of, if you can go back to your
Calculations, Jeremy. I don't know if you catch the nuance here. The parking calculation is 1 per 175 of the assembly area, while you are vested for parking spaces that you don't have based on the whole square footage of the building. So that's how we nipped at the edges of this. Before, we didn't, and we interpreted, we did not say that it was only the assembly area for some of these uses. We just said the building's this size, this is your use, this is how we calculate the parking. And so over the years, we've nipped it down to say, well, the thing that matters is the assembly area. And then we're like, well, we want to save the existing building, so let's give them more benefit of having the whole building and keeping it, which is going to be a larger line share of the vesting. So although you only need we calculate your parking based off of a specific area, you get calculation for the whole building. So again, we've nipped over the years at the edges to try to continue to lean this in a direction where if someone really wants to try to figure out how to get their use in there, it's not going to be our regulation that's going to be the death knell of what they're choosing to do. You can see in most of these examples, they're all choosing to provide parking that they feel they need to make their business work. So.
And I'll say this one went through site plan review to bring, I think, a different water service line to the building. And so we reviewed it a few times. It went through CUP. I read the staff report from Susan's team. I don't remember who wrote it, but I read the staff report. Parking, it was mentioned, but parking wasn't ever listed as an issue. It wasn't ever discussed as an issue. It was just simply, this is what they have, this is what they need, they're fine. And so the point being, I think Bobby makes that point really well. So we do have.
And Bobby, if I can just follow up on your comment, some of the commissioners may be wrong or aware, the parking is an issue, although to Bobby's point, it may not be an issue from a regulation standpoint, may not be required. It may become an issue politically or during the approval process. So I'm specifically thinking of one, and there are more than one example, but I think the most recent example was a new user for the old Veneziano building in the Riverview area. So that got imputed parking based on the square footage of the building. It's a good-sized restaurant, but it really doesn't have any parking, at least not really accessible parking. And so a lot of the other retail operators in the area were really worried about that number of people, because even if you're not requiring the parking spaces, the cars are coming, and so are the cars going to park across the street and use up other people's parking. And so the debate ends up happening even though the regulations have cleared the decks for the use. It still runs into the practical question of whether the neighborhood and the surrounding owners can tolerate the activity associated with even a use that has imputed parking.
So Adam, to that point, do you think it will be a different conversation if
say the rest of the city has the same downtown, no minimum parking? You think it changes the conversation?
The conversations that then happen at the public hearings. I think you end up still having them. I think what Jeremy highlighted, and Dr. Van noted is that downtown, the ability of the city to provide parking and the ability of the market to require parking through financing, how crazy would it be to have a hotel convention center downtown with no parking, right? Nobody's gonna do that. And so we have two and they have parking, even though it's not required because they wouldn't function without it. I think that wherever it's gonna be required by the market, it's gonna happen. And if it's not there, or you have people who are not sophisticated in the market, so you have a little entrepreneurial restaurant operator who wants to reuse an existing building, then the question doesn't get solved during the application period, it doesn't get solved during the site plan review period, because there is no site plan review. The question bubbles up and shows up at the public hearing.
And I've got one more example for you, and this is the maximum coming into play. I think it's an interesting example. The 7519 Tyward Drive, which is Southern Shopping Center, it's the new Panera, I believe just opened on Tyward Drive there. And it's a suburban 3,500 square foot restaurant. Code would require at 1 per 150 of the assembly area would require 23 parking spaces. On their site plan, they put in just at the maximum 125%, 29 parking spaces. And it's hard to see on here, but I'll point to it. Down here, you have additional landscaping. There was a discussion at one point of they wanted to put additional parking in there. They wanted more than 125%. And we just said, no, you can't meet that cap. You can't get over that soft cap. You can't make it up enough landscaping for it. And this is a space that sits inside an existing shopping center surrounded by a sea of parking. So whether we had a minimum parking requirement or not, in fact, the existence of the minimum paired with the maximum, actually, I think we probably would have told them they couldn't do it anyway because the landscaping and just the geometries of the driveways probably would have been bad location for that. But I saw a version of this that had even more parking than the 125%. So these are the things that we do deal with. And so in a way, thankfully, we do have lots of different pieces of code and lots of ability to negotiate and discuss and work through these things. And we do it on a regular basis to hopefully get a better project at the end. And that is all I have. That is our parking ordinance in a nutshell. I could probably talk through it for hours more, but everybody would be asleep. So I'll be here for any questions, and I'm sure there's more discussion we can have.
Any questions or comments from the chair right now? Thank you, Jeremy, that was really good.
Thank you.
So if I can, for the commission, we just wanted to make sure that we level set the requirements, how we viewed and utilized them. Again, from a staff perspective, we don't believe that we are prohibiting anything to happen with the current parking regulations. The discussion is still on the table because the commission did initiate a text amendment. You can give us direction. Maybe we're just thinking about it. We'll assure that the PowerPoint is in the presentations in the Dropbox for you to chew on a little bit. But at the same time, we don't want to. We're very careful about what text amendments we bring forward to not. Being very careful of how to open up the Pandora's box, if that makes sense. Just like which battle are we going to take on? That's going to be more worth the horsepower, right? I think we'll have a significant one in front of us with ADUs potentially. I don't know if what we're seeing is that we don't necessarily believe that the parking is an issue at this point, but we will continue to research it at the direction of the commission. If there's things that weren't, again, Jeremy said we can revisit it. It's about that time again because there's rideshare and other modes of transportation that people are much more comfortable with than they were even 10 years, wow, oh my gosh, 11 years ago at this point. But to that end, I'll just provide that as context to kind of why we're being very careful about how many text amendments we're bringing forward, especially with sensitive issues to the public. So,
I think from the conference we went to, the planning conference we went to, and hearing and seeing some of the benefits that other cities have received from taking this approach of removing minimum parking requirements, that was really what I think we wanted planning staff to take a look at. How, granted, what we have now may not seem restrictive and not preventing anything, but it does seem like it's a constant bone of contention with a lot of applications. So if we can tweak it to a point where we can also encourage more green space, make it a requirement, offset for parking, and then also look at what some of the other cities, not just Richmond, because I think a lot of Richmond is more industrial and if you get into the retail areas, there might not be a complete symmetry to Norfolk certainly, but there could be some similarity areas, and just look at it and see if we can benefit from some of those same changes. So that was what the intent, I think, of what I was looking to see.
we'll continue to do research. What ended up happening, a lot of the localities that had removed their parking requirements then ran into COVID, and so all the statistics are off. So I think Buffalo did a relook at once they removed theirs recently, and so we can try to go to some of the ones that have done this a little bit longer term and see if there's any comparisons that we can draw. We can try to bring that back to the commission. That'd be great. Thank you.
Let's go through our public hearing preview.
We got Andrew first. Andrew?
Good afternoon. All right, this has been brought before you several times. It was initiated in the February public hearing. You'll vote on it in the March public hearing. The purpose of this text amendment is to allow tattoo parlors, electric vehicle charging stations, and artisanal production by right and create additional performance standards. First use tattoo parlor, an establishment which will offer to practice the placing of designs, letters, scrolls, figures, symbols, or any other marks upon or under the skin. As mentioned, the ban on tattoo parlors lifted in 2006. And then in 2016, the ordinance was amended again to allow by special exception in present day CC and CR. Current regulations, it's currently allowed by CUP in community commercial, regional commercial, all downtown districts except DSP, light industrial, and the 21st Street and Colley Avenue PCOs. Performance standards require compliance with Chapter 43.1 of City Code. And the state regulations as well require licensing for the tattoo artist and the place of business. Staff recommendation, we want to allow tattoo parlor by right in all districts where it's currently allowed by CUP. That's the CC, CR, downtown except DSP, light industrial, and the 21st Street, Colley Avenue, and Riverview PCOs. And the GBA and the Riverview PCO do support, or Riverview Business Association do support this. Next use, electrical vehicle charging station. This is an open to the public commercial establishment design and intended to transfer electric energy by conductive or inductive means. Key thing with this, it's not considered a electric vehicle charging station, less than 4, and not open to the public for commercial use, okay? Norfolk does predict between 100,000 and 120,000 registered vehicles in the city by 2045. Current regulations, it's allowed by right in business and commerce park, industrial, institutional campus, airport, and Monarch Way districts. And it's allowed by CUP in community commercial, regional commercial, light industrial, and general industrial. There is one performance standard for this. EV charging stations, equipment shall be located as not to interfere with any vehicle, bicycle, or pedestrian access and circulation, or with required landscaping. And one CUP was issued in 2023 and one in 2024. For the recommendation, we want to create accessory use as well as the principal use we already have. As a principal use, we want to allow by right community commercial, regional commercial, light industrial, general industrial, institutional campus, airport, and Monarch Way. We do create 2 additional performance standards. Charging stations shall not be located a minimum of 10 feet from side and rear property lines in the public right-of-way. And the EV charging station shall be located a minimum distance of 30 feet from the nearest fire hydrant. I have had communication with the fire department. They have requested that the charging station and the fire hydrant don't be too close. Minimum distance allows them to fight the fire better if needed. We did remove the generator requirement. I talked to an engineer. I got a price quote of $100,000 for a battery energy storage system. We just felt that was a little too much burden on the applicant, so we did remove that from the standard. All right, for the accessory use, we're gonna allow that by right in community commercial, regional commercial, light industrial, general industrial, institutional campus, airport, and Monarch Way. And for the additional performance standard, limit the number of charging stations to 35% of the required parking spaces of the principal use. To clarify, this isn't an excess. This is of the required principal use, so principal use requires 100 spaces. No more than 35 of those spaces can be used for a charging station. As with the principal use, charging stations shall be located a minimum of 10 feet from side and rear property lines in the public right-of-way, as well as the charging station shall be located a minimum distance of 30 feet from the nearest fire hydrant. And for the last use, artisanal production, there's no CUP currently involved with this. We just want to expand the by right use. This is the on-site production and sale of hand-fabricated objects, hand-manufactured parts, or custom craft consumer goods using hand tools or small-scale equipment. Key performance standards must be 15,000 square feet, not to exceed 15,000 square feet, and requires a 15% gross floor area for sales and service. Key examples: cabinetry, glassworking, pottery, and woodworking. Current regulations allow in all downtown districts except DSP. For the staff recommendation, allow by right community commercial, regional commercial, the 21st Street and College Avenue PCOs, in addition to all downtown districts where it's currently allowed by right, except DSP. And again, Business Association does support this.
The exception to downtown St. Paul.
I don't know.
Downtown St. Paul's is a mostly residential district. We haven't brought it to the St. Paul's Advisory Committee, so we just wanted to just let it stay where it is downtown, rather than expanding the use and expand it to our normal commercial districts for the time being.
I just didn't know if they had the mixed use at the bottom.
They do have mixed use at the bottom. It could be one that we could look to add in the future, if there's some need, so.
Yeah, there was some talk of us redoing the downtown St. Paul's district anyway, and I think that was something that, when we had discussions on amending that, we would include this as well.
I mean, whatever we don't know what we want yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Another text amendment. So, PCOs, pedestrian commercial overlay districts. Several in the city. The purpose of the PCO is really to have a district where you're really encouraging pedestrian style both uses and development. In 1985, we created the 21st and Collie PCO. It was the first. We worked with the Ghent Business Association to come up with the regulations, and we've worked with them throughout the years to change and modify the district, add uses that, for consignment, they were the ones that came up with that. They had an applicant approach them that wanted to do doggy daycare. That was fine. We considered that retail. However, they also wanted to do as an accessory use a kennel. And in that PCO, we did not have that use, a kennel as an accessory use, except for a vet's office. So if you have a vet's office as accessory, you could do a kennel, not as accessory to anything else. So they really liked the idea of having a retail component with a kennel as accessory. They did acknowledge, though, that with, pets, animals, dogs, it may not be appropriate everywhere. So the request was to allow kennel as an accessory use by conditional use permit in both the Collie and the 21st Street PCO. Pretty much it. Any questions on that? Okay.
Oh, I thought you had, okay, thank you.
What, please?
No. Good. Sorry.
Hello, Planning Commissioners. Nice to see you all again. I believe this is essentially the same presentation I've given the past 3 or 4 times, so we might be at the point where you're starting to tune me out when I give this presentation, but please stop me at any point. Just this slide. But yeah, please feel free to stop me if you want to ask any questions or discuss as we go along. But again, what is an ADU? Just quick, simple reminder, it's a secondary dwelling unit, clearly subordinate to a principal dwelling unit, and the big three things it needs to have are a separate kitchen, bathroom, and sleeping area. That's an accessory dwelling unit. We have 6 general proposed amendments here. The first is to alter the CUP requirement. The second is to increase the maximum lot size. Third, to alter the performance standard, stating that an ADU shall only be located on a lot that complies with the minimum area, dimensional, and lot coverage standards of the base zoning district. Fourth, to remove the prohibition against an ADU having separate utilities. Fifth, to remove the requirement that an ADU shall use the same driveway as a principal dwelling. And sixth, to remove the additional parking requirements. So first, again, the CUP requirement. Currently, ADUs are only permitted in our least, or by right, in our least dense zoning districts. And they're only allowed by CUP in our most dense zoning districts. So our areas with the most walkability, you have to get a conditional use permit to do it. And the areas that you would need to drive to, you can do it by right. The proposed change would allow ADUs by right in nearly every residential zoning district. A good question to bring up, because someone else asked this unrelated to the Planning Commission. This does not apply to the historic neighborhoods right now. That is not allowed by right or by CUP in any of the historic neighborhoods right now, or sorry, historic zoning districts. So it's not being proposed to expand there currently either. Additionally, a new change is that a CUP could be obtained to permit an ADU that is accessory to a townhouse or a single-family semi-detached dwelling. Second, the conforming lot requirements. Right now, you have to meet the minimum lot area, dimensional, and lot coverage standards of the zoning district in which it is located. Now, that makes a lot of sense when the minimum lot size is 4,000 or 5,000 square feet and you're in a tighter neighborhood, but it's not always the most logical when the minimum lot size is 10,000 square feet and your lot happens to be 9,500 square foot. So we would like to add a new piece of code that would allow you to request a CUP if you are under the minimum lot size or width. Next, the current square footage regulations state that an ADU shall not exceed 500 square foot in area or 25% of the area of the principal dwelling, whichever is less. This is the principal complaint we hear from homeowners and applicants who are looking to make this work. It's simply not enough space for either themselves or an in-law who's looking to move in, or even as a rental property if they're looking to make some additional income on their property. So we would like to revise this to say an ADU shall not exceed 800 square feet in area, or 50% of the area of the dwelling, whichever is less. In this case, everybody is allowed some kind of workable, livable space, and it will always be at least half of the size of the principal dwelling, which is, again, clearly subordinate. Next, tackling the separate utilities prohibition. Currently, an ADU shall use the same water, sanitary sewer, gas, and electrical utilities as the principal dwelling. Again, we do not believe that whether or not there are 2 services impacts the utilization and use of the property, nor impacts the surrounding neighborhood. The APA and ARP recommending, or their best practice recommendation is to not require it, nor to not allow it. So we would just like to wash our hands of that requirement altogether. Next is the shared driveway requirement. Again, this is another complaint we hear very often from homeowners and applicants. It's very prohibitive for properties that are already developed. So they already have a driveway that they can't necessarily expand to get the additional parking, or they need, so they can't go out or back like they would need to get an additional parking spot, or to they can't build off to the side either because of the same driveway requirement. So this would allow somebody to build another driveway back to an ADU if that's how they decide to develop their lot. Next is the additional parking requirements. So currently an ADU has to provide 1 additional off-street parking space. But we would change this to say that an ADU shall only be located on a lot that provides the minimum number of parking spaces required for the principal dwelling. Unless for most cases, for a single-family dwelling, that's gonna be 2 parking spaces off-street. And I've blown this up a little bit further so that you can hopefully read this as well. This is what the proposed performance standards would look like as written. Again, that conditional use permit may be approved section is a little bit longer because there are a couple more things that you could request a conditional use permit to get out of or to deviate from. Additionally, we down at the bottom, you are allowed to get a conditional use permit to vary from the minimum area dimensional lot coverage standards, or to have an ADU that is behind a townhouse or semi-detached lot, single-family semi-detached lot. Again, on this slide, you don't really see what's removed, but the separate utilities prohibition, the shared driveway prohibition, that's all on here. And then you'll see an ADU shall not exceed 800 square foot in area or 50% of the area of the principal dwelling. Those are the big changes. A lot of this is also remaining the same as we have it currently. Yeah, and I believe that is the end of this presentation. So I'll leave those up there in case you want to read a little more closely. With that, I stand by for questions. Sure. Oh, sorry.
Just what was the logic on going to 800 and the max?
Sure. I can speak to that. Jeremy and I did quite a bit of looking at what other localities are doing. This is actually a little more on the conservative side, especially when you look at California and Oregon, Washington. They're, years more advanced on this stuff. They've had this for quite a long time. I think, I can't remember the exact locality that was the inspiration for this, but I believe it might have been Cary, North Carolina. Don't quote me on that. Last year, they were also drafting some ADU regulations. And it was kind of a twofold thing. We didn't want the maximum square footage to ever be greater than 50% of the area of the principal dwelling. So that's why we came up with that half number. That's pretty self-explanatory. But the 800 square foot was just kind of analyzing a lot of the stock floor plans that people provide, and honestly, the size of a new build. You're not going to find a lot of new builds that are less than 1,600 square feet. More often, it's going to be 2,000 square foot. So we figured 800 square foot is about half the size of, as close to an average-sized home as you can get in the city of Norfolk. This housing stock is so eclectic, you're not really going to have a true average. But judging the traditional housing stock versus the new suburban versus the coastal, we felt it was about the right number.
You're, I guess, in some way eliminating the need or the possibility that it could be more than one bedroom. And is that a desire to keep it to one bedroom?
I think that's generally the desire. And I will say that I have seen plans for about 800 to 1,000 square foot that do have 2 bedrooms. So I don't think it's prohibitive at all, especially if you get creative and do some kind of 2-story garage or 2-story design that's attached to a home. We've seen some creative designs for 800. I don't think it prohibits 2 bedrooms.
And I know I asked you about the height.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, I think we see more accessory dwellings if they can take an existing garage and go up. But then we've got a height requirement that we're also up against, and that might eliminate the opportunity for accessory dwellings. Although we have them throughout the city with the carriage houses in East Beach and some of the examples you showed us in Colonial Place, I think, right behind houses, right on the property line.
Yeah, that one was in Gett, actually, yeah. Yeah.
So I wasn't sure if we were going to try to address height in any of this.
Well, I think that is, and Bobby can please step in to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's kind of a twofold answer as well. Number one, that is all of these changes do not impact how an ADU would look on a property. So nothing to really change how it's utilized, just change a couple of the operational standards. Nothing that would, set a neighbor's hair on fire, generally. Additionally, I think we were also waiting for a little more guidance from the comp plan to take some of those further steps. These are a couple of changes that aren't really, again, they're not changing the use of the property, not changing how this functions. But that would be changing significantly the scale, we thought, and it would be pretty drastic policy step forward, and that was something I think we wanted to revisit when we had a little more guidance. But did I miss anything, Bobby?
No, that's correct. It's
you start to get into other questions. The ordinance already calls out when you're allowed to have a larger accessory structure, and it has to have a specific setback. So then we would have to then go into why we would allow it to be different for this rather than someone that wants a huge garage.
Yeah.
And so it just we wanted to, and again, I try to be as incremental as possible to keep the ball moving, right? I don't want it to get stuck and then we never touch it again because we've caused something in the community that just puts a bad taste in the mouth. So we think this is a good kind of first step to go, and then if we can continue to lean on people to lead and also for people to understand how these work, I think we can keep pushing it. So.
I see this kind of core to that whole conversation about developing additional units for the city of Norfolk, and we can address it in the comp plan as well.
I will note that
This would be great affordable homes for folks.
anyone can build a two-story accessory structure. Right now, it just has to be 15 feet off of the side and rear property lines. So somebody could build a two-story carriage house right now. We've seen a couple like that, or at least proposed, but they would just have to have that additional setback. That's kind of the trade-off for going up in the current ordinance.
Yeah, and that would be, because of our lot sizes in Norfolk are so small, it's just, that would eliminate quite a few, I would imagine, so. Okay. Yeah, I agree. This is a great first step, and we can address it in our further discussions.
I preface this based off of several discussions I
Sure.
had people concerns of the minimal size requirement. I guess their concern was people just turn their backyard shed into ADU, tossing grandma in there. I was like, you see you hang out the back window.
Yeah.
Rather descriptive. But I'm thinking 7D may address that, but I'm not sure if there is a minimal.
So there's not a minimum in the zoning ordinance, but there's absolutely minimum building code. It's got to meet the building code. It's got to be a habitable structure.
Okay.
So a conventional like tiny home like you'd think of that's in a shipping container where it's from here to here, that can't exist under Virginia building code right now. So it would require a building permit. They would have to go through that process. It would be vetted by both zoning and building code. So I mean, anything that tight isn't going to be approved by them. And I can't. Do you remember the minimum room size right now?
The minimum room size is,
Is it 8 feet?
It's 100 square feet if you only have one room. So if you have a bedroom, it's supposed to be 100 square feet. You have to have also a living area, and so there's a square footage requirement. If you have more than one bedroom, they can be 70 square feet each. So there's multiple things that have to get checked. These are accessory dwelling units. They'll need to get COs for these, so they'll have to make sure they meet all the building code requirements. It's not going to stop someone from doing the wrong thing, but again, you can look at some of the studio apartments. I was working with a builder that Jeremy was working with, and there are some studio apartments that are around 250 square feet that have one bedroom and have all these things, and so they can still meet that requirement. So the small square footage, I think, when approached correctly, can be done right. But there will be an enforcement piece to this to make sure that people aren't doing that.
I forget who said it, but I heard someone around here one time say you can have a small home but not a tiny home. I think that sums it up well.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you all.
Thank you.
Russell.
Alright, so the next two items are wrapped into this one presentation here for Dennis Woodbury and BLW Plus LLC. The applicants are requesting to rezone this property from institutional to multifamily neighborhood scale and obtain a CUP to continue to operate the child daycare center after rezoning. So the Plan Norfolk 2030 future land use designation for the site is institutional, but multifamily would be congruent to the multifamily designations on all of the adjacent properties. So the property is currently zoned institutional. The applicant's requesting it be rezoned to multifamily neighborhood scale and a cut be issued for the child daycare center. So here you see the site. As I said, it's currently zoned to institutional. This zone does allow child daycare centers by right, but requires a minimum lot size of 1 acre. The applicant proposes to subdivide the lot, continue the child daycare center on one lot, and construct townhome-style condos on the other lot. Since the subdivision would reduce the size of the lot to less than an acre, it cannot remain institutional. The MFNS district does allow child daycare center by CUP. So here's the proposed layout of the site. The applicant's requested a straight rezoning and has not proffered any conditions. The CUP for the child daycare center will probably contain a condition tying the CUP to a site plan. Any questions about that?
Is the daycare currently open?
Yes.
operation?
Yes, and it opened last year.
I see, okay.
The building's been there since the 70s. It was previously a church.
Yeah, so they,
They're gonna offer a site plan, as you mentioned.
So we're going to require a site plan. We're still waiting on an updated landscaping plan. Basically, what we want from this is the new side has to go through site plan review and meet all the requirements. The existing site doesn't normally need to, there's no way for us to make that go through the process when it's subdivided. But because they're getting the CUP, what we want is for them to give us a site that meets all the requirements and not just another non-conforming site. So we're waiting on an updated landscape plan for their alternative landscaping so that they can meet all the landscaping requirements. We're waiting on a drainage plan to make sure that they're not, the site that's existing isn't draining onto the other site since it's being subdivided.
So they'll include the additional building that's not shown on the site plan that is actually built currently there?
That is something I will make sure gets on the most recent one.
Just showing the existing one-story structure.
Right, this was,
Actually two.
right, this was taken, the survey was produced prior to that building being constructed, yeah.
look, yeah, it looks like just 7 units, that's 2 stories.
Correct.
And 2 parking spots each.
Mhm.
Correct.
Yes.
Actually, 3, if you include there's a garage unit, right? So there's a space under the garage.
I believe there's a garage. We haven't seen any elevations though, so I can't confirm that there's a garage. It would be uncommon, I think, to have no garage, but not out of the realm of possibility.
Would the commission like us to get elevations for you to view?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
I can do that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Next item on the agenda is Coalescence Coffee LLC. This is for a conditional use permit to allow the existing restaurant and banquet hall to expand their banquet hall capabilities, add the sale of alcoholic beverages to the restaurant, and to expand the entertainment options to the restaurant. So the site is located on the north side of West 24th Street between Llewellyn and Almohandro Avenues. It's been operating as Coalescence Coffee for a few years now. The proposed use is consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030, which encourages the transition of the underutilized industrial spaces in and adjacent to Park Place to a mixture of commercial, office, and residential. Properties on IL Industrial Light. It was also rezoned into the Norfolk and Western Historic Overlay, so there's no parking required for this district. In the IL district, you need a conditional use permit for restaurant, banquet hall, live entertainment, and for sale of alcoholic beverages for on-premise consumption. So here's a picture of the site. They got a conditional use permit in 2021 to operate a banquet hall in one of their back spaces. So the layout, as you'll see in a couple of minutes, is broken out into 3 sections. They have the front area, which is like the main area, the main coffee house. They have a garage door that goes to the second area, and then a garage door that goes into a third area. They were renting out one of those spaces in the back with 44 people for the banquet space. So that's what they got their conditional use permit for. They're now looking to possibly rent out the entire space or variations of that, as well as add alcohol sales to the restaurant itself and to allow the restaurant to have entertainment. So they have a couple different layouts based on how they're going to operate. The main layout for the restaurant, like when it's operating without it being rented out as space, is option number 2. So they have a theater set up in that middle space there, and then they have their regular office space set up in the back. There are chairs. We've been working through a couple iterations of the floor plan with them to try to make sure it's as clear as possible. And I'll go over the occupancy numbers with you in a bit. Options 3 and 4 are their 2 dance layouts. So in option 3, they have a dance floor in that middle space that can have 150 people in it. The front area for the cafe for options 1 through 3 is 157 people. Excuse me. And then with option 4, they have a dance floor set up in the first room, which allows them to increase their capacity in that front section. And then they have another kind of table set up in layout 2 and layout 3. So for that back section there, which they call assembly space 3, they have 4 different layouts for that as well, but they are directly tied with the layout option on the first floor. So these are reversed, unfortunately. The architect didn't just go 1, 2, 3, 4 left to right. He went 1, 2, 3, 4 right to left for this one. I was trying to line it up so it would all fit on one plan, but it didn't really work with this issue. So all the way to the right is option 1. This is how it'll look most of the time, either option 1 or option 2 when they're in their normal office setup. And then option 3, they have more of like a traditional banquet setting, and 4 is a theater option. So those options, again, correlate directly to the option that was listed below in the option number listed on the plan here. Are there any questions on the floor plan so far? Because I'm going to go over the capacity numbers in a second.
What was the maximum number of people? 57?
In which, so they all differ slightly, which is kind of the confusing part. I'm gonna go. Let me go to the next page here for a second. So the banquet hall layout, they have 2 banquet hall layouts, right? In the most people they could have possible, they have 102 seats and a total capacity of 354. That's the option with the dance floor in the second room. So for the 4th option where they have the dance floor in the main area, it's less than 354. I think it's like 290. So that first area can have more people because of that dance floor. But it's not as much as the 354. When it's operating as a restaurant, normally they're going to be providing 121 seats and a total capacity of 248. For context, their current restaurant capacity is 243. So it's really not it's not this increase that they're going from 44 people to 200, 300, right? Their restaurant still can have 240 people right now. But they're just looking to expand where they can do this and where they're providing alcohol and things like that. Again, in their previous CUP, they were open from 7 to 10, 7 days a week. They're not changing that. The hours for alcohol and live entertainment were 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. They're not changing that. They're just looking to expand it into the rest of the restaurant, so it's not just that banquet hall. They are expanding their entertainment options. So previously, the entertainment, again, was only allowed in the banquet space. They only requested acoustic guitar, poetry reading, and business meeting. They've added a lot of options with this one. Live band, DJ, which would just be for when they're operating as a banquet hall, not as a restaurant. Trivia, karaoke, comedian, poetry reading, art exhibit, movies, theater performance, fashion show, dance class, classes/workshops, fine arts and crafts markets, and retail markets. I believe we're going to try to clean that up a little bit more when we actually write the ordinance, but this is a cleaned up version of what they requested. And we have done a lot of these different things in some capacity before. We've done a lot of the retail markets, the crafts markets, the movies, things of that nature. But again, they're trying to cover as much stuff as possible with their request. That way, if they want to do something, they don't have to come back or get in trouble for it. That's all I have for this one. Do you guys have any questions?
Have they been working with the Civic League?
Yep, the Civic, we haven't had any issues with them over 3 years, and the Civic League did write a letter of support with them, as did the Railroad District Business Association.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Rob, on all those different configuration options, are we basically including all of them, or?
Yeah, so they would get the option to choose one of those 4 options when they set up for the day or when they set up for an event. And as long as the floor plan matches one of those layouts. There was, the applicant did have a question, if they're looking at, for example, option 4, that middle area, if they want to move a couple of those tables up and down or left and right, is that allowed? And that is allowed as long as, the tables and chairs are still there. So it's not like it needs to look exactly like this, but this is the general layout and number of tables and chairs that they'll be providing when it's set up in a certain way.
And I've not been here, so I apologize, but this is an actual restaurant? They actually have?
It's a coffee shop, but they do have some food and coffee as well, yeah. You'll notice also in the picture, they have that garage style door. And then we have the same condition there that we did for Elation and some of the other businesses. That garage door has to be closed, I think it's by 9 o'clock on the weeknights and 10 o'clock on the weekends. Especially, and when there's entertainment outside of those hours, all the doors have to be closed.
Do they have any outdoor space there?
No, there's no outdoor space. The building is right up to the property line.
And there's no on-site parking either, right? So
Correct. They're not required to have any parking because it's part of the adaptive reuse of the Norfolk and Road Historic District. I have the next one. So this item is coming back to you guys with a slight adjustment. So this is for Creatives at 255 Granby Street. It formerly operated as Prime 255. This item came before you guys, I believe, in January. And so after it came to you guys recommended approval. It went to City Council, and City Council decided to continue the item after discussions internally, and then they talked with the applicant. Essentially, this isn't exactly how it is, but they felt that entertainment was going to happen at this establishment when people were renting it out, and that they wanted it covered in the City Council wanted it covered in the conditional use permit application. Because they felt like it was something that was probably going to happen, and they didn't want to have to start getting in trouble with people if it's provided. The applicant is still pretty insistent that they don't want entertainment other than one unamplified musician. They might have some background music being played with Bluetooth speakers and stuff like that. But again, City Council wanted it covered. But because adding entertainment was not covered in the initial conditional use permit application, it has to come back through you guys to add this part to the request.
I can remember thinking that when this came through, and maybe this is an opportunity before we pass something like that along, to really press it before we send it up. I mean, I know you asked, but if it's gonna, this is not the scenario we want to see happen, right? It go all the way to council and then come back to us. So we should look at these very hard, and if they don't come with entertainment, we may need to make the decision here based on that.
And part of the conversation, I guess, is we classify this use as a banquet hall, and that's how it is in the zoning ordinance, that's how it gets presented to you guys in City Council, but the applicant's real thing was they're not really a banquet hall in the terms of they're not trying to have weddings and birthday party celebrations. They were looking for more like corporate networking and relaxing kind of events like that. So they didn't really understand why entertainment was, something that we stress so much in our application process. And again, even during conversations afterwards, the applicant was like, we're not providing entertainment. We don't know why we need to come back. But yeah, we're definitely going to be better about that in the future.
Well, and the other thing too is when you provide entertainment, you need to have a different floor plan. And so when we were pushing them to say, you sure you're not gonna have entertainment? No, we don't want it. And we don't wanna do a new floor plan because we don't wanna have entertainment, it gets kinda,
Well, here we are.
Well-
So now they have to.
It's hard, and again, I'll just, because we've had to try to corral this one a little bit. Once it gets to the planning commission for the public hearing, if they add entertainment, it has to get heard the next month because we didn't advertise it for entertainment, which is a separate use. So either way, we get delayed. So Rob has done his best, and then we try our best to corral folks and tell them, are you sure? Please, again, we don't judge people's business model, right? We let them operate, but we also ask the question when we need to ask the question. So it's tough. We will continue to press on applicants to, if they even have a thought of it, to try to include it. But this one just kind of, swirled a little bit, so.
Well, I get the frustration because we can press, but if they insist that they aren't going to have entertainment, then how do we,
In that case, there's no,
yeah.
So remind me what the hours were.
Yeah, so I'll get there. I was trying to give the overview of it before I delve too deeply into it.
That's a good question.
It's consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030 downtown, zone downtown mixed use. You need the conditional use permit for banquet hall, ABC on and entertainment. Again, this is what the site was. And this is the layout they have. So the area that in their floor plan, which wasn't very clear in the floor plan that was sent to us as part of the follow-up, was that they were looking at doing the the dance floor area and entertainment, where all the way to the left of those areas by the door. We've been talking to building code about making sure that it's okay for them to have it there. We're still working through that, but it wasn't something that was very hard to see in their floor plan. So I asked them for an updated floor plan. I've not received it yet, as well as a couple modifications to the application that we had talked about. But just dot the i's, cross the t's on the application. So this is the change. Their hours are 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and then 9 a.m. until 12 o'clock midnight Friday through Sunday. They didn't have entertainment. They're adding entertainment now. Their capacity is only 74 people. In their typical layout, they have 54 seats indoors. They do have a floor plan that shows no seating. But they said it was unlikely to happen because they don't really think they're going to end up moving the tables. But they wanted to include it just in case they have a request for it. The only real forms of entertainment they're requesting is live band and art exhibit. Again, they're not trying to be an entertainment space. They're not trying to have wedding receptions and dance recitals and things of that nature. They want to be an art and culture kind of exhibit space and corporate events, things of that nature. I've asked them to make sure, we had the business action team meeting with them last week. I asked them to include, think real hard about any other entertainment options they might want to include. I still have not gotten that back yet, but I did tell them at least to include those two options.
Madam Chair, can I ask for a clarification on the art exhibit? Is that a performance art, or is that just display of art generally? I think that's such a broad term.
I think display of art generally.
I'm not sure that's entertainment. I'm not sure a banana duct taped to a wall is art either, but it is. I don't know exactly what that's accommodating.
I guess.
And it's not performance-based, I don't know that we should list it.
And I'm fine with taking it off, but it's one of those things we just throw it on there.
Sure
And
that if there was a performance component,
yeah.
That would accommodate that if that's what they were thinking of. Okay.
Again, even after all the discussions, they're not an entertainment venue. They're adding it to get their stuff approved and get through city council. They said they might want to rent it out to an artist who wants to invite people to their art opening. I think I don't know, like if dance or something is an aspect of it, like an art display, is that something we want to include? I can talk to the applicant about that to see what type of art they might want to potentially be allowed to display, and if it includes some type of performances.
I think if it's the traditional art opening, that's what I was thinking. I think it doesn't need to be listed here. They can do that. It should be an entertainment.
Agreed.
Similar to the last applicant, could we just recommend for them just to include everything that's allowed, and then they don't have to do it, they're just allowed to do it. We've done it for other applicants where we told them this to be open later than they expect to be, but it's just because if anything changes, you don't have to come back. So just put everything that you're allowed to do, and then.
So we can, and I can definitely tell the applicant that this is something we can recommend. But at the same time, when you start adding these different entertainment options, especially when you go to DJ is the big one, right? But I've also seen karaoke night that gets very rowdy and stuff. Like, they don't want those things because they don't want to present that face of their business as to the public. When you start adding those other types of entertainment, you start giving it's a different like review process almost. It's like, okay, they want in their application they wrote that 1 or 2 person live band. We just call it live band because if they want a string quartet, we don't want to say no, right? But I mean, we can definitely bring it up to the applicant and encourage them to ask for more types of entertainment that fit within maybe more of their model.
So does the
fine, but it seems like everything else shouldn't be too much of an issue if they happen to do that, but if they're not planning to, it's just one less thing they have to worry about down the road.
My concern is we push applicants and then they get to council and council's unhappy. And then they say, well, we didn't want that in the first place.
That's exactly what I was wondering.
Yeah.
They made us do it.
Yeah.
We've had, the banquet halls where they said they weren't gonna have any alcohol. Well, we have their entertainment options, we're guaranteed to eventually have alcohol. So I think what we get is an applicant who in their mind thinks this is what I'm really going to do, but in reality, when COVID hits or something hits, they have to pivot, and they won't be able to if they're locked in on something so tight that, well, I can't do comedians because it doesn't say it in my CUP. So I don't know, it is a double-edged sword. I mean, if we push them into something they're not gonna do, I think we need to have, a conversation about, do some of these need to just lock together? If it's a banquet hall, it's entertainment and it's alcoholic beverages. If you don't do those entertainment options, it's still allowed, but doesn't mean you have to do it, like Larry said. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a further discussion of, we haven't gotten there yet. One of the thoughts that I've floated with staff is that we would end up having basic entertainment, which lumped a bunch of this stuff together, and then we focus on the conditional use permits being the things that we're concerned with, live band, DJ, karaoke. Karaoke's still questionable, but we just haven't gotten there. We're knocking down the other stuff. We haven't gotten to that yet, but we understand. We've had this discussion multiple times at the staff level, trying to figure out how to make it easier for applicants and us, so that we don't have to sit there and ask them, what do you mean by art exhibit, right? We want to try to get out of that business a little bit to really boil it down to the important stuff.
The other, and I don't mean to drag this out longer than it needs to be, but the other thing that we've been finding is we've met with plenty of people that said they want to do a banquet hall. But then they start talking about having events where they're charging at the door. So what they're really doing is they want to do a nightclub. They don't want to call it a nightclub.
Oh.
They're calling it a banquet hall. So that's why we go this way.
Not to complicate it further, they don't want to sell the alcohol. They want to require at this establishment, they want to require the ABC licensee to get the catering and the alcohol all provided. There is a condition that we wrote in the report that says that the owners of the establishment cannot get an ABC license because it's not what they're presenting to the Civic League and to Planning Commission and City Council. So this one should be much easier. This is Sparked by Hilton in Norfolk. Conditional use permit at 7940 Shore Drive. This site has operated as a hotel for a very long time. It's had a number of different owners. So Hilton just put their brand on it. They renovated the site, and now they're looking to be able to sell alcohol in their store area. Not necessarily their gift shop, right? But it's like a store area that they have for their hotel guests. They just want to sell it to the hotel guests. People can't come in and buy it and walk out. It's only to the guests, and it's not like a traditional bar. This is consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030, which designates the site as commercial. It's zone CC, community commercial. In this district, you need a CUP to sell alcoholic beverages for on-premise consumption. You'll look at the site here, it looks a lot different than it used to. There are 2 signs in the front that say now open. Those are not allowed by the zoning ordinance. I emailed the applicant, they've taken them down, but it's in the picture, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. The hotel's gonna be open 24/7. I think I don't remember the exact hours of their request, but I think it's either 7 to 10 or 7 to midnight for the sale of alcohol. We don't have a problem with it either way, but we wanted to make sure when we reviewed it that everything is straightforward. Any questions about this one?
There been any thought to allowing something like this by right for a hotel? It seems pretty obvious. It's not ABC off premise, so they're not selling to go.
The hard part for us is that some of the hotels have conference centers. Maybe we probably could tighten the window a little, but it could be one that we can look at in the future if you'd like us to.
Man, we don't get that many. It seems like a CUP is a little overkill for this.
I think the last couple of hotels that we did also had the banquet hall and or a bar, like a restaurant in the space. So usually it's just packaged all into that. I think this is the first one we've had since I've been here, at least, that is just doing the alcohol sales to guests.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello, Commissioners. Okay, this applicant is La Patrona Taqueria Bar and Grill. They're applying for a conditional use permit at 411 Granby Street, Suite 10. This site is located on the west side of Granby Street, just north of the intersection with Freemason Street in downtown. The applicant is proposing to allow a restaurant to operate with alcohol beverages for on and off-premise consumption. Okay. The proposed use is consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030, which designates this site as downtown. Okay. The site is zoned downtown mixed use and is located in the Downtown Historic and Coastal Resilience Overlay District. This site formerly operated as Plaza Azteca, which obtained a CUP in 2018 to operate as a nightclub. The applicant is coming in for a conditional use permit because they are proposing to operate after 5 p.m. with alcohol sales for on and off-premise consumption. The applicant is also proposing to not serve single-serve off-premise alcohol without the purchase of a meal. This is the proposed floor plan. There will be no entertainment at this establishment. Okay. Hours of operation is 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. The capacity is a little bit different from Plaza Azteca. I'm still working with the applicant to get their floor plan corrected. The seats don't add up. So they have 224 seats indoors, 16 seats outdoors with a total capacity of 264. And again, I said no entertainment. Okay. Any questions for that one? Got the next few. Okay. Okay, on to our STRs. This is GQ Elite Investment. The applicant is applying for a conditional use permit renewal at 1920 Norview Avenue. The site is located north side of Norview Avenue, west of Azalea Garden Road. The proposal is to allow the continued operation of a STR for a 4-bedroom, single-family home. The proposed use does not conflict with Plan Norfolk 2030, which designates this site as single-family suburban. The site is zoned single-family 6. A conditional use permit is required to operate STRs in a single-family 6 district if the structure contains 4 or more bedrooms. Okay. This is the site. The property has been owned by the applicant since August of 2019. The property was previously authorized to operate a STR in May of 2023, and that conditional use permit is set to expire in May of 2025. The site does meet all requirements for a 4-bedroom STR, which will be managed by Premier Property Services, and I did confirm with the applicant that they have the 20-minute response time. There is no cost for service in the past year, no open zoning or building violations, and no current unauthorized STR activities at this site. Since the applicant has been operating the past 2 years without any major issues, the staff is supporting a 5-year conditional use permit for this site. Okay, neighborhood analysis. Within 500 feet, approximately 91% of properties are single-family homes. 93% are residential units. If approved, 3% of single-family homes and 3% of residential units would be short-term rentals in this area. Any questions for this one?
I had a question. You said that they've been operating without major incidents?
Without any incident, yes.
Oh,
Okay. All right, this is Shuang He. They're applying for a conditional use permit renewal at 3109 Pleasant Avenue. The site is located south side of Pleasant Avenue between 11th and 12th Bay Street. The The applicant is proposing to continue operation of a STR for a 4-bedroom, single-family home. The proposed use does not conflict with Plan Norfolk 2030, which designates this site as residential mixed use. This site is zoned residential coastal. A CUP is required to operate a STR in RC district if the structure has more than 4 bedrooms. This is the proposed site. The property has been owned by the applicant since 2022. They're currently operating under a conditional use permit that is set to expire in May of 2025. The site does have 4 bedrooms, and it will be managed by HHST 168 LLC. I did confirm with this applicant as well with the 20-minute response time, and they confirm this is the same property manager as the last CUP. There were no calls for service from the police in the past year. There's no open zoning or building code violations, no current unauthorized STR activity. Again, this applicant has operated under this CUP for 2 years without any major issues, so the staff is supporting 5-year CUP for this one as well. Okay. Neighborhood analysis, within 500 feet, approximately 48% of the properties are single-family homes. 89% are residential units. If approved, 8% of single-family homes and 3% of residential units would be short-term rentals. Any questions for that? So, yes.
There is one in the front, it's hard to see.
On the, thank you, Russ.
Oh.
Yeah.
Say so.
This will be too close to the house. It's a little bit of distance.
This actually looks better than it did the first CUP.
Thank you, Sheila.
You're welcome.
Hello again, this is a conditional use permit, 9608 11th Bay Street. Location, east of 11th Bay and north of Pleasant Avenue in the East Ocean View neighborhood. Existing conditions are residential and proposals to allow the operation of a vacation short-term rental in a 6-bedroom duplex. This is a new short-term rental, this is not a renewal. Proposed use is consistent with Plan Norfolk 2030, designates as residential mixed. Zoning is RC. In the RC district, all vacation short-term rentals with more than 3 bedrooms require a CUP to operate. Here's a picture of the property. The applicant will be self-managing and has provided an emergency contact person who can comply with the requirements. The applicant also owns another short-term rental in Norfolk. I believe they came in October, November of last year. We are recommending flood improvements and foundation screening. The applicant has already started those improvements. And one violation occurred in November of 2024 for operating without a permit. For the neighbor analysis, within 500 feet, 40% of residential parcels are single-family and 18% of residential units are single-family. If approved, 10% of residential parcels and 3% of residential units within 500 feet would be short-term rentals. And the East Ocean View Civic League did express support for the application. Any questions?
I have a question
Yes.
about the violation.
Yes.
You said that this operator owns another short-term rental and has had that one since October.
Yeah, don't quote me on the exact month. It was last year. We went through the CP process, 241 West Ocean View, I believe. Yes.
I was thinking about the timing of getting a violation on this property so soon after getting the CUP on another property. I wondered what that disconnect was that he didn't realize, or the operator didn't realize that. Same rules apply.
This current violation, I know he didn't, his statement, he didn't realize he was listing. It was, according to him, an accident. He thought he turned it off on Airbnb. We did find a listing. So that's the story with this one. I can't speak for the other unit, but that's what he told me for this one, so.
Has anyone asked him if he has other properties?
I can ask that question. I do know this one. I will. Anything else?
Alright. So this applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to operate vacation rental units on a multifamily property containing 14 units on the north side of West Ocean View Avenue, west of 8th View Street in Willoughby. So an STR does not conflict with Plan Norfolk 2030. It's designated as multifamily. Property is zoned RC. It's also in the coastal resilience, floodplain, coastal hazard, and 55 DNL noise zone overlays. In RC, all vacation rentals with 3 or more units on the property require CUPs. Here's a site for the proposed short-term rentals. There are 2 structures on this site. The first is the one closest to us. It's a 12-unit apartment building built in 1964, and the second is a duplex. You can see it taller there in the back, built in 1987. The property's been owned by the current owner since November 2021. Property manager is Sojourn, which does operate numerous other STRs in the city, typically without issue. So here's their site plan that was, he did send me a new site plan not too long ago. There's not a lot of changes on here. He's moved the dumpster and a couple little things. There's still some work to be done on that one. But since the apartment building's got 3 or more units, the Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code considers short-term rentals to be a change of use and requires fire protection. They will be adding sprinklers in order to satisfy the building code requirement. The applicant's also proposing adjusting the parking spaces from what it is now to what is shown here. It's a stronger angle, so it gives more space on that drive aisle. He'll also be adding landscaping in the front and the sides where possible. He's also going to put a tree right where the dumpster shows on this one, because he's moving that dumpster out. It'll allow room for a tree. The Civic League did not support this application. Their concern was that because of the tight parking that was there, guests would just back all the way down and back up onto Ocean View Avenue. He has made those changes to try to address that. He's also given us the turning diagrams at the end of it, the right side of your screen, to show that you can turn around there. We're going to go back to him after our field trip today. We've kind of thought maybe getting rid of one more of those parking spaces might be beneficial to him. So we're going to have some further discussions with him on that.
So previously it was apartments, right?
Correct.
And were they having issues backing out at that point?
Not that I'm aware of.
The Civic League would be.
The Civic League's concerns, and there's some difference in long-term versus short-term. If you live there long-term, you'll get used to the parking, you'll know how to get in and out, whereas people that are only there for a weekend might not, they're not going to be there long enough to figure it out. So for the neighborhood analysis, within 500 feet, approximately 45% of all residential parcels and 19% of all residential units are single-family. All-inclusive, if this application were approved, approximately 3.8% of residential parcels and 9.6% of residential units within 500 feet would be short-term rentals. Another note, since this property will need sprinklers, we'll likely consider a 10-year CUP. However, the applicant wishes to start operations in the duplex prior to the sprinkler work being completed in the apartment building. But staff's not comfortable with the possibility of authorizing the duplex for 10 years with no guarantee the sprinklers will ever get completed. So to address this, we're considering, I think what we're going to do is split them into 2 separate CUPs. One would authorize a 2-year CUP for the duplex, and the other one would be a 10-year CUP for the apartment building. That would, I think, solve both of those concerns. And then if the sprinklers are completed within the 2 years, when the duplex comes back, they can roll it all into one. Any questions on any of that?
You already get quotes on the sprinklers?
I don't have the numbers. He is working with an engineer to get that stuff done. He's put a lot into the duplex already, so I think his plan is to fully renovate the whole thing.
Application process and then get the numbers from the sprinklers.
Right.
Have to back out.
But what we've seen in some of the other ones is not so much the numbers they get from their sprinklers, it's the final estimates they get for connecting their sprinklers to the street. It's a very old infrastructure in some of the areas, and it's not always predictable when they start looking for the pipe, which is why we want to break these into 2 separate CUPs. Yes, ma'am.
So Madam Chair, so I don't know if this is the right place, but here's one that's 12 units. I know you said at our briefing a couple of days ago that the percentage of short-term rental was very low, like 0.5%. But here's one that's 12 units. That could be taking away some of the missing middle. And where does that discussion?
I think that discussion is appropriate for you during the public hearing, for you to bring up as part of your analysis, the commission's own analysis. I think that's probably the easiest way to say it. It's not something that you're not able to analyze it and make your own decision about as you make a recommendation to the council for this one.
And then
Concern is that, let's say we push back against them to do rentals, we can't make him charge a certain amount of rent. So he still can keep it as long-term rentals and then charge above market rents, and that's still not addressing the missing middle. So I think that's a deeper discussion regarding kind of newer developments that's coming up, not so much of someone who's going to charge what they charge for their current property. Cause we can't make them like fit into the whatever the AMI percentages, and it makes sense to address missing middle.
So if he leaves it as apartments, does he have to do the upgrade to the sprinklers or put in sprinkler system?
Yep.
So the sprinkler system's what's gonna make it so expensive, and
Well, no, he cannot do the sprinklers. I'll speak for myself. If it's my property and you tell me I can't do short-term rentals, okay, you can't tell me what I can charge rents then. So if I want to charge $3,000 per unit, is missing middle being helped here? The answer is no. I can still charge whatever I want to charge. It's the market that drives that, not so much of what us as commissioners can do.
But I feel like we'll talk more about the housing study last week, but I feel like this is part of the conversation. I'm not really attaching we had talked during the housing study, talked about market rate versus low income and then even luxury. And then, we're talking about our lack of missing middle and add another layer, which is our deficit in housing units. So these are very big and complex issues, and now they're converging, and we're not entirely certain for sure just how much one is affecting the other. But I think, to your point, Dr. Van, we should be having those conversations, and when we talk more about the housing study discussion, I think that we will have that opportunity to do so more frequently in this year, in 2025. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know about you, Mr. Jahan.
It's a fundamental question.
Yeah.
Russell, can you go to the density?
Mhm.
So I mean, if you take a look at again, there are many things that can factor into this decision. There are market conditions. Missing middle itself is a form of development. It's not necessarily a cost of development, right? And so there are many things that you can consider based on the land use decision. And it could be that some commissioners may feel that it's more appropriate for these to stay as multifamily regardless of the rent or the cost, just because of the form of development being there. That's why you're on the commission. I think this is part of the discussion as you look at land use policy moving forward, to figure out how this impacts you and to have that discussion. I think that's part of it, so.
Now, I have a question. Is this part of the Tesseract group no?
No, it previously was, which is why you probably note the aesthetic there. I think Tesseract had the property, managing the property for the previous owner.
Oh, they managed it for the previous owner.
Right.
Okay,
The new owner, however, has switched to Sojourn.
I got you.
And on a related note, I'll bring up too, with this many units, the zoning ordinance has a portion that reads with 9 or more units, they need on-site management unless another arrangement is met with the conditional use permit. So as we've done on some of the other ones, this applicant is requesting the other arrangement part in lieu of the on-site management. I'm still working on getting some details from them for specifics on their operation, but they do have a fairly good track record with us, on their other properties. They have provided me some details. They've got, I think they said 7 full-time employees and 10 contractors, and they're, almost all of their employees live within 20 minutes of most of Ocean View. They live there. So they would like that unless, anybody's got any strong objection to that. That's something they wanted us to discuss as well.
That versus on-site person using Sojourn.
This is Sojourn has employees that are in the area.
Correct.
I guess to answer that question, has Sojourn been evaluated as far as their management, and have we seen any calls for service on any of their properties?
Not many. Every once in a while they might have a complaint, but they always respond quickly. I think the one time they did not respond within 20 minutes was because of they had a call service that was answering their phones, a third-party call service, which they fired after they got their violation for the 20-minute response. So they're responsive and apparently willing to change operations to make the best of everything. Okay.
Well, I think this brought to mind, I was thinking about Tesseract, previous discussion, and they gave a presentation, I can't remember when, but they kind of gave us their business model and talked about changing out previous smaller apartments like this into short-term rentals with the idea that maybe later they would return them to 12-month leases. Do we know if that's happened or any of it? I know not off the top of your head, it's something we can talk about later.
My understanding from anecdotal discussion with some of the partners in Tesseract as well as other folks is they're not finding that the market is allowing for them to do some of the upgrades that they've had, so they've chosen to not do the short-term rentals and to continue to go in long-term rentals because they can't. They're not finding that they're able to command the costs, the price that is required to do the upgrades for the sprinkler systems.
Gotcha.
So, from what I've heard, they're looking to diversify their portfolio a little bit, and so they are. I think they're selling some of their stuff. Again, this is all anecdotal, but in order to balance it out a little. So.
I think it's also public information. So Tesseract was the management company of the investors that own the properties, right? And I think they've actually gotten out of that management business. So Sojourn is their management company now. So any of the Tesseract properties that we were aware of, Sojourn is managing those. So that's why I asked the question about Sojourn, because they've become very popular and have
The critical mass.
Yeah.
and they're doing a really good job to ramp up for that. So
Maybe we should invite some.
I think they're part of the discussion of bringing people to the table for whatever we try to do next with short-term rentals. So.
And the other comment I think it's worth saying here in that last discussion is just because we grant a CUP for short-term rental doesn't mean they can't rent it long-term. And I think that's what Tesseract or long-term. There's just very few locations that were popular for short-term. So there's not, we don't cross those out as available housing, even if they're classified as short-term rental approved. So.
Thank you. I think that's it for public hearing preview. Anything jump out at you for the place on the consent agenda?
There were only 2 that were for, 2 short-term rental renewals, numbers 10 and 11.
Anyone have heartburn over 10 and 11?
Nope.
Put those on the consent agenda.
And as noted, I will note also, Madam Chair, that last month you strayed from what used to be the standing discussion of what can go on a consent agenda.
I did.
Yeah, the commission did, not just you. So if there's any other items that you may want to put on a consent agenda, that can be up to the Spark Commission as well.
No, Park Greens.
Or Spark maybe, or some of the other ones that you felt like weren't of issue that you brought up during the presentation.
Maybe it'd be great for us to, especially the new folks, to just kind of, what are the criteria that we would consider? So in my thought, what I remember, if it involves alcohol or if it involves entertainment, then those by nature wouldn't go on a consent agenda. Now, I don't know if that's consistent with the council or not, but I guess,
That's been my understanding for the commission, the goal was for any renewals for short-term rentals that had no issues, they would go on the consent agenda, and then I believe it was it restaurants? I think it was those that were just restaurants with limited hours, which also did include alcohol, I believe, could go on the consent agenda as well.
so no entertainment,
No
just
entertainment,
restaurant with
just restaurant by itself.
on
Again.
off, doesn't matter, I guess.
I think this is up for the commission's
Sure.
discussion, right? I don't wanna, I don't wanna guide it. I think it's what you're comfortable with, saying that you don't believe you need to be briefed on it specifically after being briefed on it now. Again, that's not something that has to be decided now. We can stick to the old policy and whatever the commission feels comfortable in the future, we can do.
I would go with 9. Their hours were less, and they're not asking for entertainment. Whereas the previous one had entertainment in there.
The big turn about this one is now off-site consumption of alcohol. I think that's the change.
With food.
Yeah.
And everybody can stay.
I think number 8, I think the Hilton item could go. Hotel.
Park. Me too.
Yeah.
I would like to put creatives on the consent agenda as well, but I think that we're still waiting on getting some details with them, but that can be a game time decision.
If we leave it the way they had it, yes, right?
Let's let,
Because that's what they asked for.
we can, let us follow up, make sure that we've got everything buttoned up, and if the commission wants to do it, so we can keep them moving, we can do that. Sherry won't like me, or Andrew won't like me when I add it to the consent, if we add it to the consent later, because Granicus will get mad at them, but that's okay, we'll worry about that later.
Okay.
Could I chime in on Park Creatives?
Yes.
I think based on the experience, it might be really important to have the applicant or the representative come to the podium and explain it, just so everybody's clear on what's being voted on and when it's explained to council later. There was
Probably a good
some
idea.
confusion
Especially
there.
since you had questions about what type of art.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do text amendments automatically, no, consent agenda?
I would not recommend it, just for the sake of.
Like here in Austin. we're-
Five more times,
But,
yeah, those need to be heard at the public hearing, the CUPs, consent, I mean, it's a public hearing, but I think I think there needs to be a hearing on the text amendments.
Yeah.
If the text amendments and the rezonings, not eligible legally first.
That's correct.
There's that.
Okay.
Chris, update on NFPA 2050.
We sing happy birthday now.
Oh, whose birthday is it?
It was Chris's yesterday.
I will not torture you with my singing.
Where am I green? Ann and I didn't coordinate, but it looks like we coordinated, but we, yeah.
And it's the city colors and everything.
Well, good afternoon, Commission. Good to see you all. Ann's passing out the full draft copy. This is the second full draft of all the goals and actions for the comp plan. You've probably seen some of these with the working groups that have occurred so far, but we wanted to make sure you all received a full copy of the current sort of draft that staff is very much actively vetting and reviewing as we speak. We actually have comments due back to the consultants at the end of this month. So we're like consolidating things and, moving things around. And so I'll say one caveat is as far as the order of goals and actions in there, there's no rhyme or reason to the goal or the order of those. There's no priority or anything like that. So we're actually actively going through it and kind of reorganizing, combining, editing, and so forth.
We should date these today with the time.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, the little timestamp. So, but we wanted to, make sure that the commission received the full copy as well, especially as we have these working group meetings over the course of this month, and the same draft goals and actions are being shared with those working groups. So, wanted to always make sure that the commission is able to see the everything that we're talking about actively, whether it's internally with staff or with our technical experts on the working groups or our partners on the advisory committee as well. So, and a big thank you to our commissioners so far who have been in our working groups. It's been a really good discussion. We've had two out of the 4 already. We had Celebrating Our Community just a few days ago, and then before that we had Connecting the City. And the next 2 and the last 2, this is actually the second and last round of working group meetings, was the Growing Equitably on March 18th next week, and then the very next day on the 19th, we'll have Embracing Nature. So that will finish up our working group conversation, where we will also continue to look at these draft goals and actions with those folks. We're also focusing heavily on the implementation conversation as we talk to those partners and city departments, kind of our leaders and champions of helping us implement the plan when it's adopted. So we're really focusing these discussions on that side of things rather than diving into the actions individually, kind of the wordsmithing side of it, which is what we're doing. So that's kind of the focus of those meetings so far. Also trying to get a feel for what timeframes might look like, given their kind of subject matter expert feedback on, what it sort of takes to do some of the more transformational and substantial actions in there. So again, thank you to commissioners who have contributed so far, and look forward to seeing everyone else at the next couple of meetings. I'll also mention, just to reiterate, that the comments, if you have any, feel free to email, or get us any comments or thoughts you have as you kind of peruse those documents. You can email, call, what have you. Let us know if you have any thoughts or comments on them as well. We're certainly open to getting your feedback too. But we would ask by the 21st, if possible. That's kind of when it would help us to kind of gather all the comments and feedback so that we have that last week to really consolidate and combine everything before we turn it over to the consultants again. So yeah, feel free to look through it. And also, thank you for the housing meeting. It was mentioned earlier. That went very well. So thanks for your feedback on that. Same comment is if you have any comments on the housing policies that you'd like us to explore in the comp plan. Again, yeah, please let us know by the 21st. And then as far as just some next steps, just a few brief updates. The advisory committee meeting I mentioned, we have our last one this March 26th, and that is at the Jordan Newby Library. And so we'll get the notices posted for that shortly. And that, again, like I said, that'll be the last one, because we're really heading into that period of basically by the end of this month, we are sort of packaging up a lot of comments and edits back to the consultants again for their kind of third rendition of those, which will be the fully formatted draft plan by the end of April. So they'll get that back to us with all of our comments and feedback, especially all the discussions that we've been having throughout the working group meetings too. So all that will be captured in those comments and feedback. And then as far as some upcoming things to be aware of for the commission, we're planning on our April mid-month doing kind of a focus session on the draft goals and actions. So while it won't be fully formatted, the idea would be for we'll have our consultants kind of join us virtually again, like we have in the past, where we'll have a little bit more focused discussion on the draft goals and actions, but it'll be the sort of the next rendition after they see all the feedback that we're going to send back to them. So it'll be a little more progressed beyond what you see right there. So that's kind of the very next meeting or session, if you will, after we finished up the advisory committee. And And then in May, actually, and this kind of ties into a little bit to the discussion earlier about some of the housing discussion, but also I think we alluded to this a little bit with some of the applications on the agenda. The future land use map obviously is a huge part of a comp plan. We are actively working on that as well, and we'll have, the plan is for the May mid-month to have a little bit of a special session on that and kind of previewing with you all what we're planning on showing for our approaches for that. I'll just say that it will be very different than what's currently the plan and the current plan. And it's place types is the name that we're giving to the designations in the new plan. So feel free to Google that, research that. It's a common term being used by a lot of comp plans around the country. Just sort of just an overview of that is it has basically primary and secondary uses. So for each designation in the city, there'll be a list of primary uses, list of secondary uses, kind of when those secondary uses might be appropriate. So residential is a good example. We've talked about ADUs a lot today. We alluded to that earlier. That's, we have some draft. You'll see in the growing equitably section some kind of exploration of further things or further ADU amendments and things like that. Also the parking, we mentioned the parking presentation today, some of those things that we're looking at. So explorations of doing a parking study to look at parking requirements, things like that. So you'll see that in the document. But as far as the future land use plan goes, it'll be a lot less designations for one, a lot more flexibility, a focus on mobility, form, and character. It's going to play off of the character districts a lot. So we're really looking forward to being able to use those as we analyze applications in a little bit of a new way. And it'll reflect what you see in the pillars, each of these 4 pillars. It'll tie directly into some of those goals and actions coming out of the pillars. So that'll be the May mid-month focus. And again, I mentioned the fully formatted draft of the whole plan would be by the end of April. And then we would basically have, after that May mid-month, at the very least, or the earliest, the end of May, we would start those open houses. So that'd be our phase 3, our last phase. Open houses where we would, celebrate the draft plan, get that comment. The in-person open houses, going into June. And then after that, we'd have probably a month, maybe a month and a half, depending on when we get through the open houses, an online version so people can comment on the draft plan online. And then, of course, we'll just go through the regular adoption process after that. So that'll take us through the summer, potentially the early fall. So those will be kind of our next steps coming up. And, of course, I'll be here, at each mid-month and, provide any additional updates as we go. But happy to take any questions.
Any comments?
Madam Chair. Chris alluded to the future land use map, just so that it sounds kind of this vague idea of that how it's going to be different. But the best way to explain how we're going to look at this moving forward is that current future land use maps from a certain time frame all dealt with the separation of uses, while our current thought process and policies that center around the future land use map will talk about how uses can be appropriate in certain areas. So it's kind of taking it and turning it around instead of saying things need to be separated, saying that if something is okay, then how should it be integrated into that area? And so it does turn it on its head a little bit. It's a lot different than what we've done over, especially the Plan Over 2030. But I think that gets to more of our built environment a little bit. So Plan Over 2030 had a lot of items that dealt with it in policy, but the map ended up being a reflection of the zoning map. So then it didn't give much guidance other than, and again, I should say other than the words, but again, both together are helpful. So so that's kind of how we're trying to turn the whole document around a little bit, so that we don't start doing this with things, just figure out if it is appropriate, if the community likes it and it's worthwhile, how do we mesh them together? So, and I'll clarify on one date. Chris said March 21st for your comments. I believe last week you said March 24th for your comments. So, so if we can, 24th. That's when we're doing our last meeting to go over each of these goals. So that'll allow us, that'll give you a weekend if you really wanna cram it in, to read it. As Chris noted, we're doing our best to assure that all the goals are equal when they stand together, right? Some goals are maybe a little too honed in and don't feel as important as no deaths, no Vision Zero, like no deaths on the transportation network, right? And then there's something else that's here that doesn't seem like it aligns with that, right? And so we were trying to make sure that all the goals kind of have standalone to be something that's just as important, so they don't get left out, which does mean we'll probably end up consolidating and collapsing some of the goals together. So for those that have already participated in your working groups, we didn't touch the document that's going out to all the working groups because we wanted the honest feedback to make sure that when we collapse it, that it makes sense. But don't think that anything's getting lost. We're not trying to lose any of the data. We're just trying to make sure that everything has a similar importance when it's brought at each level. So at the goal level and at the action level. So.
Do you have an example of the future land use map that you're using as a kind of a role model? Is there any other community or region that has this inclusionary map instead of a?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of good examples right now. I would say there's no single locality that, we sort of just looked at, but I'll say Richmond is always a good example. We've used them frankly for a lot of the basis of what we see in the comp plan. Danville actually in Virginia, they just recently completed their comp plan. There's a lot of, the way they do their place types is actually a good example for future land use. We've looked at, and they're all over the place. Burlington, Vermont is one. And so a lot of it is, like Bobby was saying, it's sort of this collapsing of things. Try not to have too many separate designations. I think there was a good example of Russell's application earlier, where there's an application coming through that's designated something that's very restrictive in what it says is appropriate there in the future. But when we do an analysis and figure out that it's actually appropriate given the context of that area and the surrounding area, the new approach I think would address that very well. Form, character, those sorts of things. Give a little bit more guidance when there's sort of a mixture of uses, so to speak. But I would say those examples are good. Charlotte was another one we looked at. Yeah. So it's kind of, we tried to kind of take a little bit from each city as we went, but then kind of make it our own, kind of custom fit it for Norfolk. And I think what we've worked really hard with our GIS staff to come up with a map, and every iteration of it, it looks better and better. So we're really happy with kind of where it's headed right now, and so we'll probably see. I think it'll be the end of April is when we'll be able to see, kind of how that looks with the fully formatted draft plan. But yeah, we're working towards that piece of it, kind of the whole future land use plan, not just the map, but the place type designations, kind of the narrative around those, what the descriptions of those appropriate uses are, mobility, form, character, and then also some kind of illustrations too as well. So like this will be some urban design to it too. Like if this designation's next to this one, what does that buffering look like? And when is it kind of appropriate to design it in a certain way to make sure that it's protecting maybe the adjacent kind of less intense designation. So it'll have some good guidance on that too.
Random question. I know WPA is, they're very involved in everything in Norfolk, but they have a wonderful treasurer in Ray Gingros. We all do. Ray Gingros is probably one of the premier planners of this nation, and he's done some great work for us. Is he gonna have any input in here? Would he?
Our consultant that we have is WRT, Wallace Robertson Todd.
Yeah, they're awesome too.
Yeah. I don't know if WPA's, who's a part of WRT's group, has reached down to ask Ray to take a look at it or not. I'm unsure.
WPA has sent representatives to be part of the work group.
Yeah.
So
I'll ask Mel because we have if you recognize the expertise of Ray Gingros, he's a brilliant mind. In our lifetime, he's right in our own neighborhood.
And he was involved in the 2030, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's involved in everything. Yeah, planning books.
I'll say that as far as we, as you all know, we have pattern books for a lot of different things, and we use them all the time in zoning, and so I think what we really do want to lean into is the character districts again I mentioned, and kind of recognizing using this framework that we're all used to and that all works really well for us in all of our processes. So I think you'll see a lot of that too, and like we have a commercial mixed use pattern book, coastal pattern book. So a lot of it will be very much this. Whatever the development is, always trying to keep it in context and character with that community, so, or area of the city, so.
That's all the comments I had. Great job, Chris. I'm exceedingly just pleased with the work that y'all are doing, so thank you very much. Looking for my email. We're gonna go next to commissioners' comments. Anyone have a comment they'd like to share? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I skip over that? I did, director's comment.
No, council met last Tuesday, not this past Tuesday. There were no planning items on that agenda, so there's not much to report at this moment. It was a short turnaround. I think VML was this week, and so council shifted their date for their council meeting up a week. Our agenda items didn't make it onto this past agenda. They'll all get put on next Tuesday's agenda. Other than that, that's all I have as far as dealing with council actions. I know, Madam Chair, you're gonna discuss on housing discussion, right?
Just going to lift it up because want to just repeat, thank you very much for coming to the housing discussion last week. Chris sent us an email about 3 days ago, just a summary of our discussion for those that weren't there. Please make sure you take a look because I think that it'll help inform our future discussions. One of the things that I'm really pleased about is that we're asking Dr. Perry to come and visit with us quarterly to give us updates on the strategic plan that they have for helping us resolve our housing issue, our housing issues. Chris included a link to a discussion that council had at their retreat in April of '23, just discussing inclusionary housing. Also, there a link also to another discussion that they had around housing last year, and I think everyone got a copy of the housing study. Yes, Mr. Young, did you get one? Okay, good. And then lastly, I'd like for Mr. Tan to say a little bit more about housing policies or suggestions or input that we'd like to share.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Commissioners, we had a very robust discussion about housing policy in general. For those that weren't able to attend, I would recommend, as Chris sent out, viewing the kind of policy direction that at least the Department of Housing and Community Development was given by council in their retreat and their most recent presentations that are linked there. But what I would request of the commission is as you have concerns or comments or even suggestions about dealing with housing policy, to please share them with staff. I had noted that during our discussion that unfortunately, due to the way the market currently is, it doesn't bear out to have a policy that says or to change zoning requirements to require inclusionary zoning, because then it becomes a yes or no decision for the developer, because they can either make it work with the money or not. And so, as Paula was very smart to point out during that discussion, she did say there could be a policy that says continue to explore ways to implement ways to provide for housing of multiple types. And we don't have to worry about wordsmithing that now, but understanding what direction how strong of a policy position the commission would like to have, whether it be do inclusionary zoning or continue to explore ways to implement parts of zoning. And we can use words other than inclusionary zoning, because for some reason that gets wrapped around the axle sometimes. So we could just use words to talk about the principles that deal with it. And so, or to continue to just say, implement the housing study, right? And so implement the housing study could be a choice, it could be to continue to explore, or it could be something that's as solid as saying, we need to make policy that says this. I'd recommend if any of the commissioners have any concerns or want to talk it through, please reach out to staff so that we're glad to answer any questions and have an opportunity just to sit down and talk about it if you like. Just let us know. If you want to sit down, I'll gladly make my calendar available just to talk it through. How you would like to approach it. But your comments will be necessary as we try to assure that the goals and the actions align with what you want in the comp plan, especially when it deals with different housing types, right? Because the housing study didn't just hone in on only affordable housing, it also honed in on where we were deficient in housing in general in the city. And so maybe the discussion ends up being broader than just affordable. So but again, your comments are very important. We want to make sure that we try to address them, and as we get towards the end of it, because this is what you have in front of you is the current draft of the meat of the document. Okay, this is actually this is what we would base our land use decisions off of, is what you have in front of you right now, minus the future land use map. We'd like to make sure that we address any of that stuff. So please provide comments. We'll try to consolidate them all, and then we can bring it back to the commission for further discussion as necessary.
How's that sound? Good?
Sarah would be.
Alright, well, I guess finally, our future meeting schedule, please respond to the emails that go out just asking for attendance. I know that you do, I'm just reiterating it. I don't think that there is any variation to the upcoming meeting, so same time, same place. So I think that's it, unless there's any other questions, concerns, answers. Scott has an answer.
One more observation. So I know we asked for a consolidated field trip day on our mid-month. 10 a.m. for me is somewhat problematic. 11 o'clock, also I know that compresses our time to be able to do the trip. And so I don't know, I hate to put the burden on staff to consolidate the sites that they would definitely want us to go to, but that might be helpful for us. And so then we don't have anybody sitting here at 10 o'clock because we decided to not go till 11. And so I guess my question is, if we feel like 11 o'clock is the start time for the field trip for the future, maybe that requires us to really critically look at the sites we're gonna go see versus trying to make it a 3-hour tour, I guess. So
Yeah, and I
feedback.
can make recommendations. I didn't do that this month, I did the last couple months.
Yeah.
But yeah, to figure out if we can get everything done in a couple hours or an hour and a half, I guess really, if we start at 11. And then maybe if there is an instance, even with next month with 30 items on, I don't know that we still need the full 2 hours, I think, because
Focus on
13 of them
the
are.
ones that are gonna be the biggest discussions. And we just need as a group, make the commitment to go drive by these locations and look at them from the streets, the same, conversation, then we can talk about them in here in the mid-month, so.
All hearts and minds clear? Awesome. Thank you so much. We're adjourned.